welcome to episode 4 of the Dicebearers podcast. I'm joined once again by Mr. Chris.
Hello, hello. How are we all today?
Yeah, doing good, doing good. Today we are covering the Serpent Horde. All right, let's get into it.
Yes.
Starting with the model range. What do you think of this model range, Chris?
So, I said last week that Dum Dum Dwarves are my favorite army in all of Good. I think this army is my favorite army in all of the Lord of the Rings.
Man, you just keep putting bigger and bigger stakes in the ground.
Yeah, but like, this army is actually this army is one that I've loved from the movies, it's one that I've loved reading from the books, and it's one that I've loved playing with as well. So,
Yeah, it's okay.
yeah. In terms of the actual models itself, though,
Yeah, get onto our ones.
yeah, so obviously the top photo is the ones that I've done, and the bottom one is the ones that
Some
Alexa
like
have
I've
done.
done, yep.
Yep. How did you find painting all these models?
They were alright, they were alright. I did them for a commission, so I didn't get full free reign on what I was doing. But for the most part, they were okay. They have some horror shows. Not as much as Corsairs from last week. There's a few melted faces and arms, but they're workable.
Yeah. They're nowhere near as bad as the Orc Archers, whose hair is also their quiver. They're nowhere near as bad as that.
Corsairs have that same problem,
Yes.
yeah. These guys don't have hair.
That's also
That's
true.
just probably
yeah.
what's saving them, I'll be
Yes.
honest.
If you enjoy doing a lot of cloth, and if you enjoy doing a lot of skin tones and all that sort of stuff, this is definitely an army you will enjoy. I actually really enjoyed painting up my force. I found it a lot of fun. I did a lot of them at once, and so I wasn't able to do as high of quality as I probably wanted to on them, but I absolutely loved painting
I think
them.
the Watchers and the Merchant Guard were my favorite to paint by far.
Yeah, 100%.
The Warriors are okay, but I had to paint like 36 of them, so
Yes,
that was...
I had the same issue. Yeah.
If I didn't have to paint 36 of them, like the first 12, I was like, yeah, I'm having a good time. And then I was like, I'll have to do this again.
Yes, I painted 62 warriors in 3 days.
Well, what is wrong with you?
A lot, yeah.
Apparently. Okay, well, listen.
Yeah. In terms of the characters and that, though, what did you think of painting those up?
I wish they went fine cast, but
Yeah.
Raza's really good though. Raza is
phenomenal. Yes, and if anyone has the old Suladan model as well, 10 out of 10 model as well. There.
No one is okay. It's just there are some parts of him that are a bit.
Well, it shows its age, but I
Yeah,
think it's a much nicer sculpt than the new Suladan.
No, I'm talking about the new Suladan.
Oh, the new. Okay.
The old
yeah,
one is great. I love that model.
Yes. Yeah, I definitely agree with that, but I still think that the old Suladan does show his age a little bit in some of his sculpting.
But I feel like he's got some of that like classic feel, you know, like where it's a model that's clearly old, but it works.
Yeah.
Like there's some models in the range that are old, and you're like, I don't want to even touch that model. And then there are some old models where you're like, well, look, it's old, but it's still it has like this. It's designed in a way where it still works despite like the lower detail in a sense.
Yeah.
It's about how the detail is used essentially.
Yes, and I feel like the new Suladan, especially his horse, has a classic case of what almost feels like over sculpting.
Yeah, it's just adding detail, and it's not actually making it any more like appealing aesthetically.
Yeah.
Which is fine. It's fine. It's a look, but it just doesn't.
It's a look.
It's a look. Yeah. That being said, again, yeah, Raza phenomenal. The commanders look pretty good. I really enjoyed the banners.
The banners, especially from the cavalry, which is the one with the serpent, not the scorpion on it, I really like that one a lot.
Yeah. I painted that one of those. That one was really nice to do.
Yeah.
So overall, pretty solid model range. Again, showing its age to an extent, but especially like the cloth and stuff. That kind of stuff aged pretty well from this range.
Yeah.
Like from Lord of the Rings in general.
Well, I think it's something that Games Workshop as a company has nailed for the last 20 odd years.
Yeah, which is, when they were sculpting these models.
Yes.
Before they nailed faces, maybe, but
Look, okay, a lot of these faces are concealed under cloth and that sort of
Thankfully,
stuff.
exactly. It's unlike Corsairs.
Unlike Corsairs, but I think if Corsairs looked good, I'd be more upset with the army list. So I'm kind of okay.
Saying that painting Corsair models is a punishment for playing Corsairs?
I'm just saying they all have scurvy.
Alright, listen, let's move on
Yeah.
to the army list overview. Get us into this, Chris. What are our strengths?
Yes, so as we'll get into once we actually start the army bonus and list part of this episode, they utilize a 50% bow limit, which is just absurd to have on such a cheap model count army like this.
Yeah, you have a 7-point bowman if you really want to.
Yes.
At 750, you could probably bring like 20. You could play Faramir's Rangers, but
Yes, I wrote a list with 31 bows in it once, at 750 points, that is. One of the other really important strengths, in my opinion, is their fantastic, not only range of heroes, but all of them are moderately cheap for what you're getting, and are fantastic additions to pretty much any way of playing that you want to, depending on how.
In terms of hero point cost, if you want cheap heroes, you can get them starting at 50. but your good heroes, your mid-tier heroes, 75 to 1. Like, you have some of the best 75 to 120 point heroes in the game.
100%.
Named and unnamed. The Haradrim King and Hasharin are great unnamed options. Suladan and Raza are great named options.
Yeah.
They're all, like, they have stats in the places you want stats, and they have the war gear you want on those kinds of heroes.
Yes, and I think that combined with the other troops and things that you can bring in this army, turn this army into almost like that Gondor, jack of all trades style list. You want to do that front to back, lines meet lines, there are definitely ways to do it. You're not as tanky as the Gondor version of the army is.
But you're way cheaper and have a lot more hitting power.
Yes, and you have ways to do cavalry options, you have ways to do monsters, you have ways to really leverage that hero and killing power that they can bring. There are so many different ways you can tech in and out of this list that it's just really fun.
Yeah, I do think this is a really fun list to list build with. I think there's a lot of options. Similar to, and there's a decent number of profiles, but it's like the way you can build different synergies and like completely different playstyles. It's not just choosing, I'm going to bring 5 more of these guys to optimize this. It's more like you can build an all cav list, you can build an all foot list, you can build different kinds of all foot lists, especially once you get into the ally pool with stuff like Corsairs and Far Harad. There's just so much you can do with like Serpent Horde at its core as an army. It's really fun. It's really good.
100%. I think one of my favorite parts of the way that this list interacts as a whole is additionally to the way that you can kind of jack of all trades style the army, is the way that poison plays into that as well. So more than half of the profiles we're about to look at have poison either built into their kit or as something that you can bring as an upgrade through the army list itself.
Yeah, that's excellent. But let's get onto the weaknesses, because there are weaknesses. Thematically consistent with last week, your army's D4. Higher than D3, so it's not quite as bad as most of our Corsair army.
That is true.
But you're looking at D4, and you got some D3 if you really want to go for it. If you watched last week's episode and you're like, man, I really like being D3, you can do it in this army list too.
100%. Yeah.
You have very vulnerable heroes. Your toughest hero is D5 3 wounds at 1 fate.
Yeah.
Actually, Hasharin at D4 and 2 wounds with 3 fate. Wow. Unkillable.
I think mathematically you'd take the 3. It kind of depends on breakpoints.
It depends on what you're fighting. If you're fighting strength 4, the D5 3 wounds is better.
Yeah.
If you're fighting strength 3 or strength 5, I think that the Suladan works out. Oh, the Hasharin works out better.
Yeah. But
regardless, that's not very tough. That's that's very easy to kill. So that's something to very much consider.
Yeah, we really are shining turds looking at those two, hey, in terms of their defense.
Yeah, look at especially after our Thor episode.
Yes.
We've done a real 180 here, haven't we? We've gone from D9 to D5.
Oh, the dream.
And a relatively low courage value. Generally speaking, you actually have pretty good courage heroes. You have courage 5 on Suladan and your kings. Yeah. And Swarm Protector on Raza is a really nice addition in terms of keeping your army on table.
Yes.
But again, those are also kind of vulnerable heroes, and you're not necessarily always going to be able to get them stand fasting your army.
Yes.
And if without them, you're courage 3.
Yes. And I think that's probably the biggest weakness in this list if you're looking at the overall formation of how your list works. If you lose 1 or 2 of your relatively fragile heroes, and you lose the ability to stand fast, or you have to use your courage 2 most of the time, slapping into a terror line, it's just going to be lights out really quickly for you.
That's okay. That's why you have anti-terror specialists.
That is true, but it's something we'll get to later.
We will, as we get into the different areas of the list.
Yes. I think when you look at this army overall, you really need to toss up what you want to protect and how you want to do it. And I think, especially from shooting, this army, yes, it can leverage a lot of bow shots, but can just cop just as many shots back. And so I think that's probably one of the hardest things to kind of look at there.
Yeah, there's a lot of very interesting things to do with optimizing and maxing this list. But I think that's our general overview done. And so we're about to jump straight into our profiles.
Yeah, we'll see you guys there. Alrighty, so let's jump straight into our army bonus here.
Yeah, here we are. So, a Serpent Horde army may have 50% of its warriors armed with bows instead of the normal 33%. Additionally, all Haradrim Warriors and Raiders may apply the poisoned weapon special rule to all of their weapons. What does this mean for us, Chris?
Super powerful, yes. So suddenly you get poison on a couple of key models and a couple of heroes to 4 of your 6 mainstay troop options, or cavalry options, just outright getting poison across the line.
It's very powerful. Rerolling once to wound is great, and then combined with the Betrayer, who we'll talk about a bit later, turns into Venom, which gives them some absurd killing power.
Yes. So for those who don't know what poison actually does, it is essentially whatever weapon is applied to, combat or ranged, it is a reroll of 1s to wound. So basically, in combat, it means you fainted without fainting. It is phenomenal.
It also means you faint with War Spears, which you normally can't do.
Exactly. You
which
faint with
War Spears, by the way, are lances that are also spears when you're on foot.
Yeah.
Which is very, very nice little sort of versatility added to all of your cavalry models.
It also means when you shoot your bows, you're basically fainting. It basically means when you have an axe and you swap them into the list, you're fainting. It means that suddenly all of your killing power can just be amplified by... kind of works out somewhere between the 5 to 10%, depending on average rolls and all that sort of stuff.
But that can really add up across the game, especially with shooting. Shooting is it's so terrifying getting shot at by this army and watching a 1, and when normally you'd be like, sigh of relief. You're like, he rolls again.
And it's comboed with that as well as the opponent explaining to you how they have more than 20 bow shots. Commonly as well.
It's so obnoxious. It's so obnoxious to deal with.
Yes. Alrighty, shall we jump into our first profile?
Yeah, so take it away, Chris. Suladan.
Yes, so this is, in my opinion anyway, the model that defines the Serpent Horde. Suladan is 100 points base. He is a man, Haradrim infantry hero, and your only hero of legend. Huge deal in this army to bring 18 models with this profile. He has a movement of 6. He's fight 5, 4+ shoot value. The 4+ comes in handy. He has strength 4. He is defense 5. He has 3 attacks, 3 wounds, courage 5. He has 3 might, 3 will, but only 1 fate. He has armor, sword, and the Serpent Banner. The Serpent Banner is a passive special rule, which is it basically says this is a banner with a range of 6 inches that Suladan never suffers a penalty for carrying. Huge. You then get to his other war gear options, and for 15 points you can buy an armored horse. And for 5 points, you can buy a bow with poison arrows. He has heroic actions. He has Resolve, March, Strike, and Challenge. And he has 2 special rules. His first one is Poisoned Sword. It's a bit bizarre that it's Poisoned Sword.
It's very confusing.
Yeah, well, it basically means that if you get shattered or something bizarre like that
does he get poisoned fists?
He does not. That's where it comes in handy. I guess that's sometimes maybe kind of relevant. We'll see. His second special rule is a rule called Ascendant, which basically means he has a 12-inch standfast instead of a 6-inch standfast. Alexa, what do you think?
This model is really, really good. He's not like a crazy killing machine, but as like the center of a horde-ish army, no, not horde-ish, horde army. This army very much, cav or infantry, is a horde army. It's 100%. An army that's bringing on foot, around 50 plus models, and if you go full cav, you can bring like 36 cav models, which for an all cav army is a horde.
Yes.
And so having this leader with a 12-inch standfast and a 6-inch banner is just phenomenal. It's necessary even. I don't know if the list would really function without this kind of leader.
Yeah, 100%. I think any hero that brings either a banner or banner effect is a huge value piece. And the fact that this model gets a 6-inch banner that scores for objectives, like that's actually just insane to me. Like if you consider 2 banner sized effects, so I mean by that as a 6-inch banner or 2 3-inch banners at 50 points, this model basically costs you 50 points base. Because you're not paying for 6 inches worth of banner effects.
And then it comes with no -1 as well.
And it does have a -1.
The downside on that is that it's on a fairly fragile hero.
And importantly, it's on your leader as well, which means that your leader kind of wants to be safe, but also wants to be in the lines for the banner, but also wants to be protected, but also wants this, but also wants that.
Yes, it means that there's a lot of pressure in how you use Suladan, and it also means that he's a really good target for your opponent to go after, because he is so vulnerable and so important.
Yes. It's like, if you lose him in a scenario where it matters, like to the death, he is a 5-point swing. He's 2 points for your banner, 3 points for your leader. It's a 5-point swing off the bat.
Even worse, if you lose him early in the game, he's just it's so hard to recover because he does so much for the list by just being alive.
Yeah.
Which is what makes him so tricky to sort of find where to balance him supporting your army and him picking up kills.
Yes, and I think that's the real kind of tricky part with how this model works. But I think if you can use him well, he's one of those models that just gets exceptionally good value out of him. I remember the first couple of games I played with Suladan, I went from doing really, really badly because I just didn't understand how to keep him safe and use the banner effect and keep him with the line. Just suddenly it all kind of coming together, and the first game I did it where it all came together well, I did a really, really, really good game. I think I had a 10-1 win on a friend of ours, Paddy, playing.
Poor Paddy. I mean...
Well, previously, so he runs a really, really cool Bolg style Azog's Hunters list.
Nothing is cool about Bolg.
Well, okay. But that was the first time I'd beaten that style of list, and usually he's the person who 10-0s me. And so for me to actually flip that around and actually play around that well, it felt so good.
No, that is, I agree. Again, very similar to Corsairs from last week. Playing such a low defense army comes with like a very steep initial learning curve where making those mistakes and losing these key pieces is something that can happen really easily.
Yeah.
Like you don't have the safety net of D7 3 Fate, you know, like an Aragorn does or something along those lines. So you have to really learn how to keep these heroes safe.
Yeah.
And once you do, you can get a lot out of them.
It really is feast or famine with this list, I think, yeah.
So shall we move on to our next hero?
Yes. Take it away, Alexa.
All right, we're talking about Raza, the Fang of the Serpent. He is a 75-point man Haradrim infantry hero of Fortitude. Comes in at move 6, fight 4 with a 4+ shoot value. Strength 4, D5, 3 attacks, 2 wounds, and courage 5, with 3 might, 1 will, 1 fate. He comes with armor and a spear, which is pretty neat. Having a spear on a hero is always good. With the heroic abilities Strike and Challenge, both pretty solid options for what he's going to be doing. His special rules Bane of Kings and Swarm Protector Suladan, both really solid. The Serpent's Weapon is his active special rule, and it is what makes him really good. At the start of the game, secretly select one hero model in your opponent's force. They are to be Raza's target, and write their name down. At the start of a fight where Raza is engaged with a target, you should reveal this to your opponent. Raza's fight value is increased by 2 for the duration of the fight. This takes Raza from being a fairly okay profile, like 3 attacks at fight 4, 75 points with Bane of Kings. It's pretty reasonable, you know, especially when we compare him to the Hasharin, which we'll be talking about next. However, this rule takes him from being a decent sort of troop killer with some versatility with a spear to being an excellent assassin and a way to mess with your opponent. What do you think, Chris?
This model is the reason I won HobbitCon. I'm just going to say it flat like that. This model goes and does so many mind games on your opponent. So in 3 of the 5 games that I played, what I was able to do is position him within 6 inches of 2 enemy heroes and call a heroic combat off of a model. And my opponent just freaked out because he was like, one of them is the target. Do I call a strike with both? Do I call a strike with none? They just didn't know what to do. And 2 of the 3 games, my opponent both of the time called a what we call safety strike with both of his heroes because he just didn't know. And in all 3 of those games, never once did I actually touch him into a hero. That's, I think, my favorite way to play this model is really leveraging that mind game. Just for as long as possible, not revealing that fight 6, not revealing the fight 6, not revealing the fight 6, until you either can go for the coup de grace, flash kill him out with him and a couple of friends, or, you know, do the strike combo with him calling the combat, Suladan calling a strike, bouncing off of one model, he goes into his target, Suladan goes for the execute on someone else, and you do a big play like that. Those are kind of the big reasons I'd want to reveal the special rule to your opponent, but usually, I find, personally, just keeping him safe as a 3 might hero who can chip away at 1 or 2 models a turn. I try to put him in 2v1s all the time because of Bane of Kings. So for those who don't know, Bane of Kings is super fainting, basically.
Well, it's a reroll all failed wound rolls.
Exactly. You always reroll fail to wound. His other special rule, Sworn Protector. Essentially what that means is there'll be the name of a character in brackets. In this case, for him, it's Sworn Protector, and in brackets, Suladan. As long as Suladan is alive and on the table, you get the Bodyguard special rule. So if Suladan is alive, Bodyguard means that Raza automatically passes every courage test he'll ever make in the whole game. So those rules comboed with this Serpent's Weapon just means that you have so much pressure you can put down on your opponent.
Yeah, I think he's basically the second include on heroes in this list. Because Suladan brings that march, you don't need to bring a March hero to be your second hero in like a smaller 400 to 500 point game. So you just bring Raza because he has just a lot of versatility in what he does. And there's a lot of interesting ways you can use him too. The obvious thing is to just make him target whatever like biggest hero your opponent has and just try to use him to take them out. But equally, if you're playing against a list that has fight 5 captains that are really important to it, it's totally like not a bad option to just be like fight 5 captain against a fight 6 dude. He can't strike to defend himself, and you just go after them. You take out those captains, you take out might off the table. If it's a hero that's too big for Raza, that's the kind of thing you can do with him. Like if it's like Bolg, Aragorn, Boromir, those kinds of tier heroes where Raza's gonna have to go into them and still be low a fight, and it's pretty scary because he's only D5. Then you can just go after their captains with him. Just be like, I'm gonna take out that captain with Raza. And that also sort of fits into certain missions as well, where he makes a really good assassin in Fog of War and Assassination, that kind of deal. So he's got a lot of versatility in what he can do. Again, his biggest weakness is the Fight 4 base. Yeah. So when we compare it to the Hasharin, who's at Fight 5, that means there's a lot more troops that Raza has to roll off in draws against. Which makes going into 4 dice very scary. And being a D5 means that strength 3 troops win them on 5s.
Yes, and with 2 wounds and 1 fate, there's a very real chance he just disappears.
Yes, the 3 might is a really nice safety net, because if you're fighting into something like that, and if you don't need the strikes because there's a lot of situations where you might not need him to strike, burning the might to get some kills by winning a fight that you were going to lose otherwise is a pretty decent option. And obviously against fight 3 armies, he's phenomenal because 3 attacks on an infantry model is great.
Yes.
But there is that consideration that when you're fighting fight 4 troops, or especially if you're fighting fight 5 troops like elves, it's really scary putting Raza into an elf with a spear.
Yes.
Like that over, 3 to 4 turns of him fighting that, he's probably going to actually just drop. Like, unironically.
Yes. I find that when I play Raza into the fight 5, especially into the elf matchup, he basically exclusively becomes the hero assassin.
He becomes a strike bot.
Yes, you keep him in the spear support role because he does have a spear for as long as you can, and you pull him forward to just surprise that, Elahand or Eladir or even someone like Glorfindel. You can go to the fight 6 and strike chase with them and have that much more reliable way of hitting the fight 10. You have so many more tricky ways you have to use him, but being a spear-based hero means you can do that, basically.
Yeah, the spear is really what lets him sort of play into those matchups where he's at a disadvantage. Yeah, he's very solid. He's, I think, second auto included in the list after Suladan. I think they are your 2, unless you're running a very specific list, which we'll talk about later, the sort of more specialized list. If you're running a more generic list without any sort of direct archetype, Suladan and Raza are your basing heroes that you always bring both of. I think unless you bring 30 troops, which is a pretty, even at 400 to 500 points, you're going to be coming close to that.
Yeah, I think there's an argument definitely to see either a King or a Hasharin in there instead of Raza, but I think Raza does become the more natural pick.
I think he's the first choice, and then based on preference, like if you have a preference to the others, I think they're all equally solid choices in their own ways. But I think he should be your sort of default, and then once you have a feel for what all the models do and which you like and which sort of suit your play style, you build from there.
Yeah, that's a very fair point.
Yeah. With that, let's talk about his cousin.
Yes,
maybe his uncle. The Hasharin. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, I don't want to talk about that anymore. Hey, so for 80 points, you get a man, Haradrim infantry hero of fortitude. He is a movement of 6, a fight of 5, with a 3+ shoot value. The 3+ shoot value is important. He is strength of 4, defense of 4, 3 attacks, 2 wounds, courage of 4. He has 1 might, 1 will, but he has 3 fate. He has daggers, throwing daggers, and a blowpipe, and I assume he shoots daggers out of the blowpipe. He has 2 heroic actions. He has strike and defense as his heroic actions. He, just like our friend Raza, has the Bane of Kings special rule, which is reroll all wounds all the time, and he has Stalk Unseen, which, as we mentioned in the Corsairs army review, if you have a terrain feature between you and your opponent is more than 6 inches away, you cannot be the target of anything. It is a really nice way of keeping this model with a defense of 4 safe for a long time. He also has a special rule that allows him to never be trapped whilst he is still standing on his feet. So a cavalry can trap him when he knocks you prone, but he does not get trapped when he's just surrounded by 6 infantry. What do you think of the Hasharin?
I mean, we talked about it last week. They were good then. They're still good now. Yeah, like we said, so when you compare him sort of to Raza in what they can do, the Fight 5 makes them so much more consistent against those troops. And he still has that assassination potential with the strike from Fight 5. But since he only has 1 point of might, he can't chase heroes as much as Raza can. You know, Raza can do 2 or 3 strikes to wear down a hero. You know, if maybe that hero is forced to call a combat for some reason or remove, they're down to 2 might, Raza can actually just, over the course of 2 or 3 turns, burn out their might and then eventually be guaranteed to be higher fight. Whereas the Hasharin, he can go for the strike on the killing blow, which is really good if you call it off a combat or some sort of combat like that, but he can only really do that once.
Yeah.
But that being said, on the other hand, because of that higher base fight, he is so much better against a lot more of the sort of field in terms of troops and taking them on.
Yeah, exactly. That Fight 5 basically means that against anything but elves, you put him with a spear spot behind him into 2 models and watch 2 models die every time.
Yes, it's very, very consistent in doing that.
Yeah. And you combo that with someone like a Suladan, who, as long as he's mounted, will probably be killing 2 models as well. Put that in with the next profile we'll get into, the Haradrim King. You probably are going to be getting 5 to 6 kills off pretty much all of your heroes every single turn, if you can keep that momentum going. And so, because of that, I think the Hasharin is a really value pick. And I think the debate between Raza and the Hasharin is really about what you want that Bane of Kings model to do. Do you want it to be fainting out your opponent, baiting them, cause them to spend might where they might not want to? Or do you just want to put pressure down and say, hey, this model is going to kill everything you touch base with until you bring a big hero to bear, and I have a chance of killing that hero anyway.
Or just calling it a defense, burning your fate and holding it up for 2 or 3 turns.
Yes, and I think that's the other thing we should talk about here, right? The Hasharin has heroic defense, and Raza has heroic challenge as the secondary heroics on each of them. The defense is so good at just stalling out for a turn with 3 fate. On low defense models like the Hasharin, heroic defense is one of the best rules in the game. I said this with the Dwarf episode as well. You either want really low defense 4, defense 5, or you want like defense 8, 9, or 10 basically for heroic defense to get value out of it. Or the most value out of it.
Yeah, against most heroes, you'll go from being wounded on 4s to 6s, which is huge in terms of jump.
And it means that people can't just might through to blow through you either, which is also really nice.
So, Hasharin, very solid. On to our next profile, the Haradrim King. I'll get us into this one. Here's for 60 points, a man Haradrim infantry hero of fortitude.
Hero of valor, actually.
Sorry, you're
FAQ.
Right. Post FAQ, he's a hero of valor, you're correct. Move 6, fight 5, 4 plus shoot value, strength 4, d5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 5, 2 might, 2 will, 1 fate. He comes base with an armor and sword, and for his heroic actions he has the ever useful march, and the slightly less useful, but occasionally relevant, maybe sometimes, strength. For options, he can bring a horse, a bow with poisoned arrows, and a war spear. Go ahead, Chris, tell us about him.
Yes, so this is probably the best unnamed hero in your list by quite a considerable margin when it comes to just versatility. You, for 75 points, get essentially a lance cavalry model with 2 might behind it at fight 5. Whilst it's not going to be consistently killing as harshly as something like the Hasharin will be doing, the availability of a cavalry with a war spear means that the turn you need to pop something, it will disappear.
Well, yeah, the main difference between the Haradrim and the Hasharin, as we touched on last week, is that on the turns that the Haradrim King charges, he will have huge killing power, but on the turns he doesn't, the Hasharin will be outpacing him by quite a lot.
Yes.
That's the sort of deal. So the Haradrim is giving you sort of like a burst of damage in the turn he gets in, and then on average every second turn he's probably going to be charging, so you kind of have 1 turn of big kill from him, next turn he's going to be less impactful, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
What that means, though, is that his heroic combat turns are excellent. He is a very good hero to charge in and a heroic combat and look for like a big fling into like a backline hero or like a banner or something like that, thanks to that extra movement he gets from being mounted, which is again something that Hasharin can't quite do.
Yes, and very importantly as well, he's coach 5 with 2 will. In an army like this, you really do value that courage stat and that will. So he has 1 extra point of will up on the captain and 1 extra point of courage. That actually makes a huge difference as this army starts to look towards the breaking and all that sort of stuff. So it's really important to kind of play around either him or Suladan or Raza, basically. Those are your best points of calling standfast. One's bodyguard, one's coach 5 with 3 will, and the other's coach 5 with 2 will.
Yeah, and I think March in this list is very important for both variants. It lets the more cav-focused one, or even a Mumak list, get a lot of value out of it. The Mumak by getting extra movement for running you over.
The Mumak needs to call March off itself, though.
Does it?
Yeah.
Does it not get March from others?
It does not, no.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I don't know that. Well, you learn something new every day. I guess I would have cheated if I used the Mumak, but thankfully I have no intention of ever using the Mumak, so it's fine. But regardless, it's still, for an all-cav army, it is excellent for allowing an obnoxious level of kiting while shooting. Moving 7.5 inches and still being able to shoot is so obnoxious. Foot armies literally can't keep up with you unless they call their own march.
Yes, and I think that's what makes this model so impactful, is he can run around with 3 or 4 horsemen and just be an absolute pain in the back of your opponent's force, literally.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And then on the other hand, for like a troop-based army, obviously infantry-heavy armies really value march, getting around.
The one thing to note with this model, which feels a little bit weird in the context of the rest of the army, is he doesn't have poison.
Oh, that's unfortunate, yes. He doesn't get poison on his war spear, you are correct.
Yeah.
Right, well, let's get into the War Chieftain of the Haradrim. Go ahead, Chris.
Yes, so for a mere 50 points, you get the man, Haradrim Infantry Hero, Hero of Fortitude. He is movement 6, he's fight 4 with a 4+ shoot value. He is strength of 4, defense of 5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, only courage of 4, as I mentioned, 2 might, 1 will, and 1 fate. He comes with armor, a sword, and importantly, he has a war spear built in. So, again, for those who don't know, war spears are spears on foot, and they are lances on a cavalry model, which means his 10-point upgrade for a horse is a very efficient way to bring a lance cavalry model. You also get a bow for 5 points as well.
And he has march.
He does have march as his own.
I guess we should talk about it. Would you ever bring bows on your chieftain and king? And how often would you do so? And in what army list would you do so?
Yeah, very interesting question. I think if you're running an army that is exploiting a lot of cavalry models, bow shots become really important. And as we get into the lists towards the end of the episode, I do have a fully mounted list that I want to show off. Basically, in that sort of list is where you would look at bringing the bow shots on your heroes. I think if you're going to do it on one over the other, you do it on the chieftain, just because you can be a bit more liberal with a lower fight value, throwing might into the bow shot. And that's the whole point of bringing the more expensive bow, I think.
Yeah, I think that the king is also more likely to be wanting to move into like really far off angles to look for backflank kills on support heroes and support pieces, whereas the chieftain, he's more there for the march and they're just sticking with the line.
Yeah, 100%. I think definitely I would, if I was going to put it on one of the two models, if they were both on my list and it was the choice, I had 5 points spare and I decided a bow is going on a hero, I would put it on either Suladan or this guy. And I think it's a real 50-50 as to which one you do it on. I don't think it's a mistake to put it onto either. I do think it would be a mistake to put it onto the Haradrim King, though.
That being said, I personally really feel that the king just outshines the chieftain. Like, it's very, like, if you just look at them side by side, the differences are small, but the differences are important. Mainly being the Fight 5. The Fight 5, as we talked about with the Hasharin vs. Raza, similar deal here, except that neither of these heroes has access to strike or any sort of other boosting. So they're just stuck at whatever their base value is.
Yeah.
And so when all else is equal, that Fight 5 is going to make a huge difference, because when he's charging, he's rolling effective 4 dice, either of them are, because they'll have 3 dice and a banner, and understands you're charging into 2 guys you really want to win. And that, the difference between Fight 4 and Fight 5, when you have that many dice, is huge.
Yes. Going, I've rolled a 6, let's have a roll-off, compared to I've rolled a 6, time to roll a bunch of dice to kill you.
Yeah, and because, that's the main difference. And, like, and think about it this way. If that Fight 5 wins you one combat against, 2 7-point warriors, it's basically paid the difference between the models.
Correct. So if you look at both of them as a lance cavalry hero, the 60 points the chieftain is there, and 75 points the king is there. So that extra 15 points you're paying for 1 point of fight, 1 point of courage, and 1 extra will point. So it does work out relatively well, I guess to say.
It is 5 points per stat, as it basically kind of is, generally speaking.
Yeah.
But I think that Fight 5, like I said, if it even wins you one fight on a charge, it's basically paying for itself. And that's quite likely to happen, as most armies are fight 4 as a baseline, you know.
Yes.
Or a lot of armies will have some sort of fight 4. And then if we just even take it into, you know, fighting fight 4 heroes, you know, if you kill one fight 4 hero off being fight 5, like that's, you know, like a 50-point swing.
Yeah, definitely.
So that jump to fight 5 to me sort of, and that's even ignoring the fact that, you know, the Haradrim King is now of Hero of Valor, which with how high model count we're going actually can be very relevant.
Yeah,
depending on the
definitely.
points brackets.
Yeah.
So all those things combined make it, you know, the Chieftain is a good option, the King is a great option kind of deal.
Yes. There are reasons you might bring the Chieftain instead of the King, but they are, I think, in my opinion anyway, few and far between.
Now, onto the Haradrim Taskmaster, a very niche but cool model. Alright, I'll take it away. With 50 points, you will get a Man Haradrim Infantry Hero of Fortitude. On a move 6, fight 4, strength 4, d5. 2 attacks, 2 wounds, and courage 4. Only 1 might, 1 will, and 1 fate. He comes with an armor, club, and whip. He has the heroic action March and the special rule Whip of the Masters. Each time a friendly hero model within 6 of the Taskmaster from the same army list, including the Taskmaster, attempts a heroic move, heroic march, or heroic shoot, roll a d6. On a 4+, they may call the desired heroic action without expending might. So, what do you reckon about this, Chris?
I know you have a very different opinion on this model to I do, but I actually really like how this model is in this list. There aren't many armies with a Taskmaster in it, and I think the Taskmaster as a profile, regardless of what army list it's in, is always going to be a very niche part of your list. But I think, especially in the more foot-based list, where he can just be a part of your line, he's a really nice inclusion, because you're probably going to be spending a lot of your points of might on either moves or combats with this army. It's an army that loves doing both, and for half of those being the moves, you will just have a chance to get that point of might back. If you look at it as every second time you spend a point of might, you'll get it back. That, while it's not necessarily true, that's roughly how you should look at it.
Yeah, yes, I agree.
It means that this is an army that can very easily kind of hit the 9 to 12 sort of might pool at 750 points. It means that that might pool could actually be 16 by the end of the game. It's the same sort of idea that you see when you're looking at Gambling's banner. It's not always a huge deal, but the times it can come up can be phenomenal.
To me, I feel like this is a very high might list already. You have access to 2 very solid 3 might heroes as a baseline, and you're probably bringing, you know, around 4 heroes. So, to me, you know, like if you're bringing 4 heroes at 750, you're looking at about 10 might without the Taskmaster. And to me, you know, on a 4+ getting these free moves, it can be good, but I just don't feel it's necessary. I like I put in the notes there. I think if he had a mount, I think he would be pretty solid.
Yes.
The fact that you can't mount him just puts him so far behind on killing power compared to your other 2 options. And he brings you extra might, but he doesn't actually bring you anything that your army doesn't already do. It just lets you do it potentially a couple extra times.
Yes.
And to me, I don't value that highly, personally.
Yeah.
That's just how I feel about him. And the 4+ really like irks me personally. I just hate having to roll for things like this. I think we talked about it. There's a few different ways I would prefer this rule to work. Like maybe the first time in a turn you use it, you get it automatically or something like that. But that might be too strong. Maybe up the points. But to me, the model for you get 50 points. It's just I would upgrade him and make him a king. Get the extra might by base. You know, some games you won't call that many moves, and then you know his rule just doesn't do anything. It varies so much on so many factors that I'd just rather bring the more consistently good options.
Yeah, that is definitely fair. I think the one thing to really compare him properly to, I guess, would be looking at the Haradrim Chieftain. So they are identical, other than the fact that you obviously don't get access to the horse and bow, but they're the same points. You just trade 1 point of might for the rule to half the time keep might on the moves, and probably being realistic, actually, only really the moves and marches. I don't see many reasons you'd be calling a heroic shoot. An army like this either has such an overwhelming bow advantage that even if you do cop the shooting first, it's not the end of the world, or you have such a big advantage they're not shooting back anyway. And so shoots aren't always a big deal. Obviously, there will be that one game every now and then where calling the heroic shoot might catch your opponent off guard, could be clutch. The one thing I will say with these models, though, is it often becomes a rule that tempts you as the player to almost spend might too much.
Spend might poorly, I understand what you're saying. Just spend might just because you can.
Right? You go, oh, 4+ to get might back. Oh, I'm calling a move. Haha. Oh, I rolled a 3.
I've definitely done that when using the Earl the Young, who has a similar rule. I've definitely been like, oh, just +1 my wound roll, and then I lose my might, and then 2 turns later, I'm like, man, I wish I still had that point of might I wasted, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the bait with this model, right? If you look at this model as he just exists in my army as a 1 might captain, if his special rule goes off, fantastic. If it doesn't, whatever, and you play your might pool the same as you would normally play it. You don't look at it as the potential to get more might. You just look at it as here's a rule in the list that could just get me 5 points worth of stats throughout the course of the game. Could be huge.
I think a generous but somewhat accurate way of looking at him is he has like a 3 might pool for moves is something I would look at. Like if you call 6 moves in a game, 3 of them go off, he's kind of like a 4-1-1.
Yeah, a pseudo 4-1-1.
The downside on that is that it's 4 might or 3 might that can only be used for 1 action.
Correct.
An action that sometimes might not, well, not 1 action, 2 actions, march or move, really. And those actions will come up, but maybe not all games, and the circumstantial nature of his ability is what irks me personally.
Yes. I think the only other reason why you would bring this model is he has access to the whip.
And moving on swiftly to our next profile. Chris, take it away with the Haradrim Warriors.
Oh man, I want to talk about whips now.
No,
okay.
You get to talk about Haradrim Warriors.
Okay. Okay. Look, it's a consolation prize, right?
Yeah, exactly. They're pretty good, so go ahead.
They are really good. For a meager 6 points, you get a man Haradrim Infantry Warrior with a movement of 6. He has a fight value of 3. He has a 4+ shoot value, strength of 3, defense of 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage of 3. He has armor and a dagger as his starting war gear. However, he has access to a warhorn for 30 points, a banner for 25 points, a bow for 1 point, and a spear for 1 point as well. And on top of all of that, if you are bringing a pure Serpent Horde or a green allied army, you also get the poison special rule attached to every weapon instead of just the poison arrows with your bow.
They're really good. Like they're just genuinely a very solid troop model. They, have pretty solid stats all around. D4 is low, but it's high enough to be, above strength at 3, which is the most common strength for troops. And the fact that they don't need a shield to be D3 means that you just always can bring bows. You don't the sort of downside of bows in some lists is that you lose a point of defense essentially. But because the army can't bring shields anyway, you don't really suffer that, right?
Yes.
So you just gotta look on the bright side of life and not being able to bring shields.
Yes.
Which is their weakness, I would say, actually.
Yeah. I very, very, very distinctly remember. So I played, when I first got back into this hobby, for the most recent time anyway, into the Lord of the Rings game, I realized how important shielding was after I played only Haradrim for about 6 months. And went on to a dwarf army and was like, wow, I don't die. That's amazing.
Shielding is that's actually, now that I think about it, that is their biggest downside, is the lack of a shield. In fact, this list's biggest downside is the inability to shield. I think, we had that game a couple weeks ago maybe, where I won the game because you couldn't shield in one fight and had to kill one of my guys, and then the game ended, and you were in such a dominant position, and then you just lost because of that.
Yes. I think definitely the lack of availability to shield hurts this profile and most profiles in this army list quite a lot. However, you are only paying 6 points for the base. And realistically, that means you're paying 7 points. So you're probably going to bring either a bow, a spear, or 8 points for both of them. So realistically, if you look at this profile as 7 points, you're either getting, armor, sword, and a bow with poison on all 3 of them, or armor, dagger, and spear with poison on all 3 of them at 7 points. And that's phenomenal.
The poison is really what makes the profile so solid.
Yes.
Because the sort of downside of low fight is that you can't really ever... if you're higher fight than your opponent, be able to feint with or equal, being able to feint with a spear support basically gives you poison.
Yes. But
just having the poison all the time makes up for the downside, because if you're lower fight, you have to stab. And the downside of stabbing is huge in comparison to feinting.
Yes.
Just because when you feint, you reduce your fight by D3, but as long as you have a spear support, you can still use your spear support's fight. So essentially, there's no downside. When you fight 3 and you have a sword and you're fighting a fight 4 army, you would have to stab, which results in a strength 2 hit if you lose the fight, which is brutal on a D4 army.
Yes.
But having that poison built in means that that's not an issue.
Yeah. Because stabbing would mean not only am I rolling on a 5-up to kill myself, but my opponent also gets to roll strikes if he's just 1 to 5.
Exactly.
It is a big deal, unfortunately. And so having that way around that whole situation and issue with just saying, by the way, poison, huge.
Yeah. Now let us move on to our next model, the Haradrim Raider. All right. So for 11 points, you get a man Haradrim Cavalry Warrior at move 6, but actually move 10 because they're on a horse. Fight 3, strength, shoot value of 4+, strength 3, defense 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, and courage 3. Coming in with an armor, dagger, and horse. With the options for a banner, which you occasionally might take, but most likely not, thanks to the beauty of Suladan. You can bring a bow with poisoned arrows and a war spear. So these guys cost 13 points, right?
Yeah. In my opinion, they're a 13-point model.
Yes. Yeah. So I think you always bring the bow with poisoned arrows and war spear, and thanks to your army bonus, that war spear is poisoned.
Exactly. Yes. This model, I don't have words to describe how efficient a 13-point lance bow cavalry model is.
With poison.
With poison. Like, what is happening? Jay, fix this. What is happening?
Essentially what this means is you're killing most troops on either 4s rolling 1s or 5s rolling 1s on the turns you charge. 4s rolling 1s is brutal.
Yes.
It's like, you can unironically just charge these guys into 2 guys and kill them consistently.
Yes, this model has the killing power of any Lance Cavalry in the game at strength 3, so Knight of Dol Amroth, right? Look at that profile. This model is killing more than that model because it rerolls 1s to wound.
Assuming no fallen, but yes. But I will say, I think the best comparison is the Knight of Minas Tirith, because they're both coming at fight 3. And the Knight of Minas Tirith, I think, is 12 points base?
13, so 14 with a shield.
So 14 with the shield. So you're getting the bow, and you're getting the poison for 1 point less in trade for 2 points of defense, which I think is a very solid trade. Yes. And Knights of Minas Tirith are an excellent sort of budget cavalry option already, which just shows how great these guys are, being a point cheaper, having poisoned and a bow.
Yes. In my opinion, this is the best cavalry base in the game.
It's definitely up there. Knights of Minas Tirith with Boromir are up there with them.
Yeah, definitely.
Specifically because of that synergy. But then we also have the Serpent Riders coming up later, who kind of challenge that sort of...
Yes. And I think it's when you look at this model in context of the heroes you can bring around Haradrim Raiders, as well as the Serpent Rider, the other cavalry base you can bring in this army, that turns this profile from, like, cool to really good.
The only thing that confuses me is, why is it a separate profile, not just an upgrade from Haradrim Warrior?
And
the same thing applies to Serpent Guard, which we'll talk about in a bit. It's just really weird. But
so the reason for it is the Warhorn upgrade. You don't get a Warhorn on this profile. That's literally the only reason.
Yeah, it's just very odd.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Serpent Guard...
Would Warhorn really be that strong even? Like, I don't think it would be... It just seems like a really odd sort of decision.
Yeah. The Serpent Guard, you definitely could just slap a 5-point upgrade for the horse onto, but...
It's just weird. I don't have a problem with it. It's just something to note. It's really interesting across different armies how that works out. But with that being said, let us move on to the Serpent Guard. Chris, take it away.
Yes. So this is probably one of the best ways to bring Fight 4 into your infantry line from a spear support angle, outside of running some funky allies like Corsairs. So you are a movement 6. Oh, sorry, I'll do the keywords first. You are a man Haradrim infantry warrior for 8 points. You are movement 6. You're a fighter of 4. Fantastic. 4+ shoot value, if only that was relevant. Your strength of 3, defense of 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, courage 3. You have armor and a spear, and you have a singular special rule called Poison Spear. Very powerful profile.
Solid. I think something that we're seeing across these profiles is like the Haradrim Warrior, Haradrim Raider, and Guard is a similar sort of optimization to a strength that we have with Corsairs. You're paying fairly low points for what you're getting in trade for defense, essentially.
Yes.
Less so than Corsairs are, but you're still getting that, very cheap for what you're doing because you're low defense.
Yeah. I personally think that these guys, just like Corsairs, are not paying for the army bonus that they're getting. What I mean by that is that your Haradrim Warriors and your Haradrim Raiders aren't paying for the poison special rule. These guys I don't think they are either, to be completely honest.
I think across the game, most armies don't really pay for the army bonus, and the question just becomes how good is the army bonus more so than anything. And this is a very impactful army bonus.
Yeah, in my opinion, when it comes to the Forces of Evil, this is probably one of the 3 or 4 best army bonuses in the game.
Yeah, if only Azog didn't get Master of Battle.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's it's that, Angmar, Corsairs, and these guys. I think
those are the big army bonuses, I think, on the evil side.
Yeah, and I think
the Necromancer of Dol is a pretty big one.
Definitely, if you're running that sort of list.
That's more niche. But yes, in terms of like army-wide impact, those are the big ones.
Yes, and I think being able to pump out so many models, they're only 8 points. Like, it is very easy to bring a very large number of Fight 4 spears into an Orc allied army. Like, there are so many cool things you can do with that. If you're doing pure Haradrim on foot, you can do 7-point bows as your front line, and then these guys as 8-point spear sports. Like, there are so many ways to play around this.
I think a really solid option is allying this to Mordor and bringing a lot of Morannon Orcs as your front, and then these guys as your second rank.
Yes, I've done that a few times, and I really enjoy doing it.
I think it's very solid. They're a very solid profile. The one sad thing is they don't have bows like Haradrim Warriors do, but that's fine, because you only need to bring half your army as bows and the other half as these guys, right?
Yes, so essentially you pay 50% of your army with bows at Fight 3, and the rest of your army is Fight 4, because there are so many good Fight 4 options.
That's also something that's really good for this army, and I think good. And if you ever have armies that have multiple fight values, optimizing a mix of like Fight 3 and Fight 4 essentially means you're not paying for Fight 4.
Correct.
If you have like a frontline, the Gondor does this really well. Gondor's probably the best at this because of Boromir.
Yeah.
Bringing Fight 3 troops and Fight 4 spear supports is essentially for every frontline guy, you're getting a free +1 fight.
Yes, and when you're in range of someone like a Boromir, you're steadily getting to that Fight 5 value.
Which, yes, but you're paying for that. But the thing is that every warrior that's getting spear supported to a higher fight is essentially coming at 1 point less than they should be.
Yes, and whilst at 1 point, whatever, that actually means quite a lot over the course of an entire game. Or
across an army, that can be 20-25 points, which is a pretty big chunk of points.
Yes.
Even at 750 points, that's still a significant amount of free stats, essentially.
Yes, and the way I like to think about stats like this is you're looking at it in context to the whole game, right? If you look at it as, for this entire turn, 16 models got Fight 4 for free, quote unquote, right? And you won most of your fights and lost 2 models. The next turn, 14 of those Fight 3 models are getting that stat for free. It's adding up more and more over the course of the game, especially if it's a stat that you're utilizing to get kills.
And again, this Fight 4, we've talked about it quite a bit, is a very important breakpoint because it's sort of... Fight 3 is like... It's low in some senses. I think Fight 4 is kind of the baseline you want in your troops. I think Fight 3 is like low fight armies of Fight 3.
Unless you have a reason for it, I think Fight 3 is probably not very good. I think unless you're running something like Mordor with all the heroes and tricks you can do with Mordor, Fight 3 is a very bad stat. Haradrim, Fight 3 can be atrocious if you aren't bringing the right combo pieces with it. Angmar is horrific without the army bonus. Army of the Dead, again, without the fact that
without the defense and the terror.
Yes, the defense and the terror becomes a horrific stat again. Like, there are so many important things that happen when you're Fight 3 that just having an army like this that would be stuck at Fight 3 would mean it's one of the worst armies in the game.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but it would be much tougher to play.
Yes, but going to that Fight 4, which is the average fight value, I think is a very big deal.
Which, speaking of Fight 4, let's talk about the next model. Chris, go ahead.
Yes, so this is the Serpent Rider, the upgrade of the Serpent Guard. They are literally an identical profile with the caveat of a horse. So a man, Haradrim Cavalry Warrior. They are move 6, fight 4, 4+, 3+ shoot value, defense 4, 1 attack, 1 wound, and courage of 3. Armor, war spear, and horse is their war gear, and the poisoned war spear.
Very solid. Just same deal, just what we talked about. They're very similar to the Haradrim Raider. They lose the access to the bow for fight 4. And that's excellent. You just take that trade. It makes them, I think someone did the sort of math on it. They are basically the most efficient, warrior in the game in terms of cavalry.
Yes, I think these guys comboed with the all-important bow on the Haradrim Raiders means that these are probably one of the best 1-2 punch style models in the the game for cavalry contingents. What I mean by that is your Serpent Rider, Rock on the Boat, Fight 4. He's your front line. He's your damage dealer. He has a lance. He's the one who's actually packing that punch when the lines are meeting. But up until the lines meet, half of the models you have carry a bow because they're Fight 3, Haradrim Raiders. They have a spear as well, which means that they're also lance cavalry. So for that turn, you need to go from I've killed 5 to 10 models to I need to now break you this turn. Everything's got a lance. Every time you win a fight, you're basically getting a kill. Every time you lose a fight, you're probably losing a model about half the time, which is fine. You take those trades when you're doing the coup de grace as a cav army.
Yeah, it's a very solid model. There's, like I said, it's this whole army's sort of motif of relatively low defense, but exceptional killing power.
Yeah. In my opinion, this is probably one of the highest killing power armies in the game because of how powerful poison is on this profile. And speaking of poison, you get one of, in my opinion, the best ring wraith models in the game within the context of specific armies.
Yes, so onto the Betrayer. He is a Spirit Ring Wraith Haradrim, Mordor Infantry Hero of Valor, for 120 points like all the named Ring Wraiths. So what does he bring us? He is move 6, fight 5 with a 4+ shoot value, strength 4, d8, 1 attack, 1 wound, and courage 6, so standard Ring Wraith profile, coming in with 2 might, 14 will, and 2 fate. Pretty okay so far. 14 will is a pretty solid casting pool. He comes with heavy armor and a sword. Cool. Heroic actions, heroic channeling, same as Ring Wraiths. He can bring a armored fell beast for 70, fell beast for 50, or a horse for 10. Okay, cool. Probably bring him on a horse. I don't think he's a fell beast kind of Ring Wraith. That's mostly for the Kamul and the Knight of Umbar, I'd say. Is for special rules is where he gets fun. He comes with Bane of Kings, so pretty solid killing power. Harbinger of Evil, Terror, and Will of Evil. But the Master of Poisons rule is what makes him so stand out in the Haradrim army list. At the start of the move phase, before heroic actions are declared, the Betrayer may spend a will point to activate this ability. So 1 will a turn, basically. Until the end phase of that turn, friendly models with the Poison Weapons special rule within 6 of the Betrayer may reroll all failed wound rolls with those weapons. He gives everyone Bane of Kings.
So basically what this means is Suladan and all 4 of the infantry options we just talked about get Venom, which is failed 2 wound rolls, full stop.
Yes, it's obnoxious. This, when you thought rerolling ones was scary, rerolling everything is really scary. When those, it turns, 26 strength 2 bows from a, oh cool, 1 or 2 guys die at turn 2, 4 guys at turn die, or, everyone dismounts. It's just very, very powerful with how this list runs. Now, for his spells, he is a mediocre, subpar even caster. Got a 3+ for Drain Courage, 4+ Transfix, 5+ Compel, 5+ Instill Fear, 5+ Sat Will, and 6+ Black Dart. So, I think you can occasionally chuck out a Transfix with him against bigger heroes, but generally speaking, I'd say 6 to 8 of his will is going into that poison rule, and then maybe 2 to 3 spellcasts a game. Or the occasional will burned going into a combat. Because that Bane of Kings, him also having that full rerolls to wound, means that if he's on a cav base, charging something on foot, that's pretty solid damage output on him.
Yeah. I find when I use him as a spellcaster, I'll be chucking 2 transfixes, probably, you said it perfectly, 2 to 3 times a game, right?
Yeah.
You use it to bait out those points of will, and even might points if your opponent feels like they need to do it. I very rarely throw the Compel, and if I do, I'll typically throw 3 to 4 dice at it, because I just really need that Compel happening. 14 will in the bank seems like a lot, and I think it's the trap that a lot of players will fall into. They go, 14 will, Venom every turn, why not? Master Poisons rule activated. Spellcast, Master Poisons. Oh, we're 4 turns in, I have 2 will left. Whoops. It's an interesting balance of going between the how do I keep my army around me buffed and how do I become an absolute menace on the tabletop being a Ring Wraith profile.
Yeah, I think, like I said, in this list is where he truly shines, thanks to Master of Poisons. And I think he is worth considering in a lot of versions of the list. He brings, obviously, if you're running the non-poison models, he becomes a lot worse, which we're going to talk about soon. So the 2 non-poison models in this are the Watchers of Karna and the Abrakhan Merchant Guard.
Yeah.
When running a list heavy on those, you don't bring him. But any other list that's heavy on Haradrim Warriors, Raiders, Serpent Riders, yada, 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 you're pretty much always thinking about bringing him. And that's ignoring all the other great stuff a Ring Wraith brings. Harbinger of Evil is just always a great rule to have.
Yes.
-1 couraging an army is just disgusting.
Yeah. I think we should actually touch on those special rules quickly, just because we've not done it before. So Harbinger of Evil is 12 inches projected from the Betrayer's base, is a -1 to your opponent's courage values. That cannot be reduced below 1, so it'll be a minimum of 1, which means that a courage 3 army is suddenly courage 2, which is a huge deal when it comes to breaking. Terror is pretty self-explanatory. Your opponent has to roll courage just charging him. And Will of Evil. Will of Evil is a really interesting one. All of the ring rates have this rule, except for the dog or door ring rates, which have a completely different rule set.
Yep.
So Will of Evil is every single turn a ring wraith model is in combat, they lose 1 point of will, which means the Bane of Kings roll or wounds, whilst is fantastic, you have to be super, super, super careful about when you put this model into combat. Because if he's on 1 will and he's in a fight, at the end of that fight phase, when he drops 1 point of will, he disappears.
Yes, when the ring rates are reduced to 0 will, they essentially die.
Yes, they are removed as a casualty, which is a big deal.
It is. There are some slight tricks you can do in missions where your opponent getting kills matters. Disappearing your own ring wraith can actually be a pretty good trick.
Yes, so Fog of War is a really good example. If my target is the Betrayer, and the Betrayer magics himself off the table by rolling all 8 of his remaining will into a spell, and he disappears from the board, I didn't kill him. I get no points.
I don't think that counts for... I think it only matters in assassination which person kills. I think Fog of War is
Fog of War says kill.
Does it? Right.
Yeah.
I'd have to look at the FAQ. I'd need to check. But yes, there are... In certain missions, there are things you can do.
Yeah.
But moving on from our spirit to our anti-spirit specialists. Take it away, Chris.
Yes, we have the Watchers of Karna. So the Watchers of Karna are a fantastic profile. They are a man, Haradrim infantry warrior for 9 points. Their movement 6... Fight 4, Strength 3, Defense 3, 1 attack, 1 wound, Courage 3. And their war gear is a sword. Now, I know what you're thinking. Chris, why is this 9 points? Why is this a good profile? Well, that comes with the options. You see, a Watcher of Karna must always pick one of these options. They must pick either a bow with poison arrows for free, or twin blades for free. Obviously, both Poison Arrow gives you access to some 3+ shooting with poison, but the Watcher of Karna with Twin Blades, obviously Games Workshop, 2 attacks, 2 swords, it makes sense, gets an extra attack. So suddenly, you get a Fight 4 model with 2 attacks. And the other special rules that he has 3 of them. He gets resistance to magic, fantastic already, right? Being able to resist magic rolls for free is huge. He gets hatred against spirit models. What hatred means is you have a special rule where you get +1 to wound against whatever is in the brackets of that special rule. So in this case, yes, in this case, hatred, and then in brackets it says spirit. So if this model were to fight a ring wraith model, which has the spirit keyword, the Watcher of Karna gets +1 to wound in combat against that model. To combo with that, Watchers of Karna have a special rule called Steely Nerve, which means that whenever this model wants to make a courage test to charge a model with terror, they get +2 to their courage rolls. Additionally, when a Watcher of Karna is being attacked by a model with Blades of the Dead, they also get +2 to their courage, which means they go from courage 3 to courage 5. That is huge.
Yeah, they're really good. Look, listen, if you're an Army of the Dead player and your opponent has like 15 of these, you can just go home. Like, just pick up your models and just say, 12-0. No, but yes, they are phenomenal. We talked last week about how good Reavers are with 2 attacks. Watchers of Karna, a similar base profile, and they trade that sort of +1 to wound, crazy bloodthirst stuff for getting a bunch of utility.
Yes.
Anti-magic and anti-spirit utility, which is anti-terror as well, which is a really nice addition to Courage 3 army.
Yeah, 100%.
They bring something very useful while also being a 2-attack, troop model at 9 points, which is very solid, I think.
Yeah. If Raza is what made me win HobbitCon, Watchers of Karna are what kept me in my games in the super clutch moment.
Actually, no, Watchers of Karna did with you because they killed the ring wraith.
So, Watchers of Karna are just fantastic. For 9 points as well, like, you look at all the special rules, you look at the 2 attacks, and you'd expect it to be a 10, 11, even 12-point profile. The fact that they're defense 3 means that they're only 9 points. Their greatest weakness in that low defense also becomes their greatest strength in only a 9-point profile.
Yeah, it's, again, very similar on theme to what we did with Corsairs last week, where you're giving up defense to be cheap.
Yes. And that really makes this model one of those really hard models to protect well. Because they're such a low defense, if you're playing into an Elven army, for example, oh my gosh, these guys disappear so quickly. But if they get into the combat, like, them and a spear support win more times than not against an elf and a spear friend with him. Like, they just do so much work in so many different ways.
They're also very interesting when we talk about the other sort of elite foot option, the Merchant Guard. Each of these strikes a different break tone, with one being strength 3 D3 and the other being strength 4 D4, which means mixing them sort of lets you hit both breakpoints. One will be very effective against D5, D7, while the other will be very effective against D4, D6, D8.
Yeah, definitely. And that's definitely something I actually showcase in one of my army lists later.
Yes, mixing them is very solid.
Yes.
Now, on to our next profile, a big hero, the Golden King. God, this is going to be a wordy one. All right, so for 130 points, you get a Man Haradrim Infantry Hero of Valor. He has move 6, fight 4, strength 4, D5, 4 attacks, 4 wounds, and courage 4, with a might value of 2, a will value of 6, a fight value of 2.
Fate value.
Oh, sorry, fate value. My bad. Anyway, for special rules, he comes with Burly. Now, the Golden King is weird. He and his bearers represent a single model with a combined profile as shown above, as we talked about. The component parts cannot be attacked or wounded separately, so he is essentially a single model on 2 bases, which makes him really weird. Once he reaches 0 wounds, both of the carriers are removed, and the entire model is treated as having a single control zone. Now, there's some other weird stuff. He cannot be spear supported, because he's technically not on a single 25 mil. It's weird, I don't get it. And we'll finish the rest of the profile before we talk about the weirdness. He comes with a two-handed weapons,
which is a sword, technically. So he has a 2-handed weapon, which has to be a sword.
Yep. And he comes with the Golden Throne. The Golden Throne is a banner that does not hinder him in any way, so no -1 penalty. So he's a 3-inch, not a 6-inch banner, but that's still pretty solid.
Especially if you have him sideways in the second.
Funnily enough, this is the one case where his weird basing kind of gives him about like an extra 1.5 inch of banner distance.
It's almost 2.5.
Almost 2 inches. Yeah. Well, it depends. It depends exactly how he's sort of, if he's diagonal or if he's fully sideways. But yes, you can get some extra inches out of his 3-inch banner by tilting him sideways.
Yes.
And then he has another rule, which is a shenanigans rule, as far as I'm concerned. The riches beyond renown. This is actually probably the more I think about this rule, I think this is the reason you bring him. So the Golden King may spend any number of will points whenever an enemy hero model takes a courage test within 12 inches. The target model's courage value is reduced by 1 for each point of will the Golden King spends in this way. The Golden King may even wait for the courage test to be rolled before choosing whether to spend any will. After the Golden King has reduced the target's courage value, the target may still use might or will to alter their courage test. Okay, so let's run us through a scenario. You have a courage 5 hero who has now passed on a roll of a 5.
Yes.
They have 1 might and 1 will remaining. I spend 3 will. They have now failed no matter what, and they flee off the table.
Exactly, yes. And just being able to say that to your opponent, like, oh, by the way, that hero that just barely passed its courage test, right? And has 2 might points left, that's going to be super clutch for the late game. I might only have 2 will left, I'll make you burn both points of might for nothing. Or, if I have 3 will left, they just disappeared.
Yes, this rule is very powerful. The problem is that he has 4 attacks.
Yes.
He is very good at cleaving through 3 troops. The problem is he's also very bulky, very hard to protect, and he's 130 points.
Correct. And
he's D5. He's very vulnerable. Yes. Is the sort of downside on him, because you want to keep him alive till that break point. But he's an infantry model with a really huge footprint that has fight 4, that doesn't have strike. Like, a fight 5 captain on a horse could just blow this dude up.
Yes. And I think very importantly to mention here quickly, his only heroic action is heroic resolve. So, whilst he has those 2 points of might, he doesn't usually have many good ways to use them outside of moves or combats.
Yeah, and combats might even be tricky, because maneuvering that that base through the lines is just
Yes.
it's so weird and it's just so tricky to use. Like if he was a single 25 mil base, I think he'd be a fantastic model.
Yes, or even just do what they did with the Bolg, make it an oval base, something. Yeah. It's just tricky the way this model functions in this list, right? Or just in any list, I should say.
Yeah, well, and then the fact that he's stuck on infantry means that he's still vulnerable to cavalry heroes.
Yeah.
Like he has a lot of killing power. 4 attacks at Burley at strength 4. That's like literally one of the highest killing power infantry heroes you can get.
Yes.
But he can't be spear supported, and he's got all these other.
He has other downsides in other ways. Yeah.
So I'm so conflicted because, like, on paper, this profile is really scary. But at the same time, it has a lot of trickiness to it. I'd love to see someone use it well. I feel like if you got really good at positioning him and messing around with him, and you could pilot him to that end game where he's so powerful.
Yeah.
Like, because the scary thing is if you have 130 points, you know, and it's not outputting a lot of kills or not putting a lot of pressure on the board. Like, yeah, he's a banner, but you know, even if we count that as a 30-point banner, like he's 100 points, he needs to put some sort of kills on the board.
Yes.
And putting him in those positions just feels really risky, and yeah. But if you can get him to late game with the riches beyond renown, he is terrifying. I would hate to deal with this. 12 inches is such a huge radius too.
Yes, and I think that's what throws so many people off. I see this profile, and I talk to people about this profile, and then I mention riches beyond renown is a 12-inch rule, and they just go, what? 12 inches? I thought it was 6. What? Like, that really throws a lot of people for a loop. And I think that's something you should definitely remind your opponent of throughout the game and just constantly nag them with it, you know? Oh, just a reminder, right? Especially if you have terror in your army through allies and stuff like that. Just a reminder, you know? Which is beyond renowned. It's a rule that's there. Just a reminder. Which is beyond renowned. Like, just keep reminding your opponent of it and just make them keep thinking about how can they play around this rule well.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot to it. But yeah, the Golden King is an option worth playing around with at least. We're going to talk about a meme list with him, but even beyond just the shenanigans potential of this model, I do think he's worth considering because of that rule.
Yes.
Now let's move on to the boys carrying him, or at least what they do when they're not carrying him, the Merchant Guard of Abrakhan. Go ahead, Chris.
Yes. So for a meager 9 points, you get the Man, Haradrim, Infantry, Warrior keywords. They're move 6, they're fight 4, they have a 4+ shoot value, which I'm going to pretend has a use. They're strength of 4, they are defensive 4, they are 1 attack, 1 wound, and courage of 3. They come in with a 2-handed sword and the special rule Burly, which means they are essentially striking your opponent at a strength value of 6.
Pretty good. They are like we said. This is the sort of ability to mix around what's your front line, what's your back line in this list, and to bring in fight for in a variety of ways. And again, as well, mixing those breakpoints with the Watchers of Karna, being, you know, half your army strength 3, half your army strength 4, so you're always getting some sort of optimal strength sort of to defense ratios against your opponent.
Yes, and I think when you look at this army and you bring a foot slugging variation of Haradrim, most people go foot slugging, okay, they're going to be grinding me out, rolling a lot of 6s or 5s to wound, and then you chuck a couple of Merchant Guard into line, it's like 3s. What? 3s? And you just start crunching things.
Yeah, against most armies it's probably 4s, D5, D6 is the sort
4s to 5s is what you'd realistically expect, sort of thing.
But if you're ever fighting a low defense army, you're just like...
Yes. The same friend, Paddy, who brings the Hunter Orcs. Merchant Guard love fighting Hunter Orcs.
You're higher fight, you got the perfect strength, you got, you know, just everything you need.
Stats in all the right places.
The only thing is the defense, but that's fine. That's alright. You don't care, you're going to win your higher fight.
Exactly, right? Higher fight means it's impossible to lose, right?
That's how it feels like whenever I deal with your stupid elves. Oh, Christ. This Galadrim Core Guard are terrible. Anyway, well, that's a topic for another day when I'm done being freaking about it.
Legitimately, though, this model is... Oh my gosh, where to start with this model? Like, it has so many uses on a 25 mil base especially. Just being able to peek around and bring this model to bear in the middle of a line. Bring it in on flanks. Bring it in as your entire front line. Bring it in intermixed with the 2-attack Watchers. Bring it mixed in with any of your really powerful strength 4 or higher allies. It's insane.
Yeah, getting 2-handed Burly for so cheap. Again, very optimized for that low defense, trading it to be very high impact on the kills.
Exactly. Yes. I think, this model is fantastic. When we get to the list especially, we'll talk about it more.
Well, onto the final model, the model that I don't want to talk about, but I have to. Alright, so for 275 points, the War Mumak of Harad. Mumak, monster, war beast, hero of fortitude. Keywords. A War Mumak is comprised of a Haradrim commander with armor and a war spear as the warband captain and the Mumak itself. So, the Haradrim commander is a hero who rides on top of it. He comes with fight 4, strength 4, d5, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, courage 4, and a 2-1-1 profile with march. So, very standard captain profile. The Mumak itself. So, coming in base, it is at a movement 8, a fight value of only 4, its probably biggest weakness on a baseline, a strength of 9. just take a moment. All right, you good? You done? Which means that it knocks Balrogs prone.
It does, yes.
And comically so.
Yes.
Defense of 7. Only 3 attacks, but it is a war beast, so it gets the extra on the charge, correct?
Correct.
10 wounds, courage of 2, but that's fine because it can use its commander's courage of 4 and higher, as we'll get onto later.
Correct.
It has a Howdah of capacity of 12. The models that may ride in it are Haradrim Warriors, Serpent Guard, and Watchers of Karna, so you don't get access to your allies in the Howdah in this version, but you can in others. Yeah. And then the upgrades. Okay, so we've got 7 or 8? Oh, we've got a lot. So I'll run them down in list order and then we'll talk about them individually. So, the Gnarled Hide for 30 points, the Mahud Beastmaster Chieftain for 25, Rocks for 20, Sigils of Defiance for 20, Task Weapons for 20, Foul Temperament for 15, and Repelling Lines for 10. Now, the only good one here is Repelling Lines, obviously, but let's go through them individually. So, Gnarled Hide is the easiest, simplest one. The Mumak has a defense of 8 rather than 7. I think it's basically auto-include.
I think there are reasons why you might not need it.
Maybe if you're doing like a double Mumak list or like very low points, maybe not.
Yeah, so depending on how you kind of do your list building, I think this is probably the 3rd upgrade you'd auto-attack on.
Interesting. It is a very solid upgrade, though. Going to D8 means that most troops are just not killing you.
Yeah,
that's exactly the main thing. Right? The Mahud Beastmaster Chieftain. So, he's got a little paragraph. So, he replaces the Haradrim Commander in all respects, including having the same heroic actions, except that the Mahud Beastmaster always stands on the wooden platform in the front of the Howdah. He's crouched low enough on the edge of the Howdah that he counts as being in the Howdah for the purposes of in-the-way rolls and any other effects that target the Howdah. A Mahud Beastmaster Chieftain wears armor and is equipped with a dagger and has the following profile. So, he gets a fight value of 4, a shoot value of 3+, a strength 5, and a d5, not that they matter too much, 2 attacks, 2 wounds, and courage 5, with 3 attacks, 2 wounds, 2 fates. So he's just an upgrade.
3 might.
Sorry, 3 might, you're right, 3 might. So he's an upgrade to your captain, essentially.
And I think this, full stop, every single time, is the first upgrade you do on any Mumak. So this turns your Mumak profile into a 300 point flat upgrade, and what this does, it means you courage 5, which means that rolling for your courage test, which as we'll get to into soon, is a really big deal with this model. It means that you're doing it courage 5. It means you have 2 will to help you pass those rolls. It means you have 3 might for the moves and marches that are really important on a Mumak, and you have 2 fate in case shots get past that Howdah.
Yeah, you're right. I think that this is probably, you're right. This very much is the auto-include, getting that +1 on basically on all the most important stats. Yes. And since the Mumak is such a big points investment, you need to. Like, this one gives you the most control and consistency.
Exactly, yes.
Alright, the next upgrade, Foul Temperament. The Mumak has its attacks increased to 4. Amazing. But it has a -1 penalty to all courage tests when rolling to see whether or not it'll stampede. How do you feel about this one? Conflicted?
No, I think this is pretty well one of the least used ones.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah. Like, going to 4 attacks is like a really nice thing when you just read it. But that downside, oh my god, that downside. Because as we'll get into it, the penalty of stampeding is insane. It's quite literally game ending, potentially, quite often.
Yes. Yeah.
Alright, so Repelling Lines, the best upgrade in the game. So, models in the Howdah may attempt to dismount from the Mumak during the move phase after the Mumak has moved. Roll a d6 for each model on its attempt to dismount. On a 1, the rope snaps. Perfect. And the unfortunate model will suffer falling damage. On a 2+, however, the model successfully dismounts. Place it in base contact with the Mumak. Models that dismount this way may charge as normal, or they may not make shooting attacks.
Yes.
Okay, it's not actually that good. I was joking.
So, for only 10 points, you get a way to jump out of the Howdah, basically. Without repelling lines, models in the Howdah stay in the Howdah. There is no way to get them out other than with this upgrade. So I think there are some circumstances where using it can be really powerful. For example, Watchers of Karna, you can basically use this as a transport for them.
But listen, in the some of the other lists we'll talk about where you can bring half trolls in them, I think it's hilarious.
Yes, I think that's where repelling lines actually
I think half trolls with repelling lines is something I just want to do. As long as it involves running a Mumak, so I'll never do it. But that's beside the point. I think it's comical.
Yes.
That being said, we will move on to the rocks. If they do not move, models in the Howdah may make a single shooting attack with a strength of 6 and a range of 8.
Yes. Effectively, you get 8-inch strength 6 shooting instead of your normal strength 2 bows. Can be really big, can be really useless. It kind of depends on how you're playing the Mumak, how your opponent's playing around it. There's a few reasons why it could or couldn't be impactful. I would leave home without it more times than I would with it. I think if you have random points spare, maybe chuck it in, but I think just more models more times is useful.
Yeah, how many points is rocks again? It is 20 points. Yeah, like just bringing like three more bow guys is probably more impactful. I mean, like if you bring a full Howdah or rock guys, I guess you can do it, but the range of 8, like once you're within 8 inches, you're looking to just run people down.
Yeah, I think that's the problem, right?
All right, the Sigils of Defiance. I think this is probably one of the best ones because one of the best counters to Mumak is magic. So what does Sigils of Defiance do for us? Models in the Howdah gain the resistant to magic special rule. What this means is every time you're targeted by a spell, you get 2, roll a d6 to ignore it for free when you're doing your magic resist roll. Additionally, on a 6, you negate any wound rolls that you take. Any wounds that you take, as if you spent a fate point.
Yes.
Which is also really good.
So I think your first upgrade is always the Beastmaster, and your second upgrade will always be the Sigils if you bring the second upgrade.
Yeah, I think because again, the main counter to the Mumak is, a wizard dealing with the guy riding it or compelling it or doing something along those lines.
Yeah, and I think having not only the magic resistance rule built in, but also you just get a channeled fury and everything in the Howdah, which is phenomenal.
It is very good, yes. And then we go on to the task weapons. Mumak with task weapons will inflict 4 strength 9 hits when it tramples rather than 3. It's pretty good.
And I think we'll get into that as we get into trampling and how that kind of works as a war beast. So we'll save that one for a little bit.
Yep.
Let's move on to the special rules for this model.
It's got Terror. It's got Trample. So the Trample is the inflicting strength 3 hit, not strength 9 hits. By base, it's 3 of them, and then with the task weapons, 4.
Yes.
And then the awesome presence. Friendly Haradrim and Mahud within 3 inches of this model may reroll a single d6 when making a dual roll. This is cumulative with other effects such as banners. I mean, why
Phenomenal,
not?
Right?
Being able to reroll 2 dice per fight is disgusting.
Yes. And the way the Mumak moves is really important. So this is where Trample kind of comes in.
Here we go. Let's go. This is going to be a 20-minute segment on just Trample. We may as well just put that in the thing, right?
Yeah, there's a few special rules that you kind of have to look at. And the biggest one is going into the way the actual, what are they called? War beasts work in the core rulebook. So the core of how this basically works is the war beast, the Mumak in this case, will always move 8 inches. The war beast has to move its full distance, and the way this individual model works is you pivot in any direction you want. You can literally Tokyo drift in a 360 until you pick the direction you need to move, which means that moving this model to face its direction can be a bit tricky because you need to get the center of the base moving in the right sort of way.
Yep.
It means that if you start the model horizontal and turn it to then face 90 degrees, you kind of get an extra 1.5 to 2 inches worth of movement. So it actually can be quite a lot more movement than you'd think coming out of it.
Especially with marches as well.
Yes, and it will move in a straight line. If it hits a friendly model, the Mumak, the pilot of the Mumak, can choose to end its movement there, or it can just keep on moving. If it keeps moving, it will do the trample attack. And basically what that means is it's not a charge, which means you don't roll a courage check. And you don't have to do anything else other than roll however many strength, whatever hits this individual war beast does. So, in the Mumak's case, you roll 3 strength 9 hits on the rider and on the mount, if it's a mounted model. Otherwise, just 3 strength 9 hits. The tusk weapons means you roll 4 strength 9 hits up and down. If you hit something like a chariot, you do 4 strength 9 hits on every component of the chariot individually. If you kill what you have hit, you keep moving. If you don't kill what you hit, you stop and you're in combat with it. Essentially, when you call a march, you can move an extra 3 inches, which means the Mumak can move 11 inches with the march attached to it, and can still do the trample attacks. There's a couple more really important rules that kind of go in tow with a Warbeast, that being that the Howder and the models in the Howder, which in this case is a defense 9, 5 wound Howder, they are fearless. For all purposes during the game, they will never flee due to not having anywhere to go, and when it comes to making courage rolls for fleeing models, i.e. break tests, they will always count as passing. They will auto-pass that roll. Obviously, if your opponent has a way to make them roll other courage checks, I believe they do still have to roll for those.
Yes, they pass courage tests for being broken, but not other ones.
Yes, which means that when this model takes a wound, so the actual Mumak itself takes a wound, it has to roll a courage check for every single wound it takes.
The Stampede test. So, what happens if you fail the Stampede test, Chris?
It's beautiful. So, if you pass the Stampede test, you act as normal. If you fail, control over the Warbeast the next time it moves is given to your opponent. Now, your opponent can move it straight into your own models, and because your opponent is the one piloting it, he chooses whether it stops or not. I'm telling you, he's not going to make it stop. It will stampede straight through your models. He can run it into buildings. He can run it off the table. If he runs it off the table, the model is removed as a casualty. It is so powerful being able to move this model. If you're trying to cast magical powers on this model, you can never knock it prone. You can never do anything that would knock it prone, whether that's a hurl, whether that's a magical power that would, like a Sork Blast, stuff like that. But you can compel or transfix the driver of the Warbeast. So if you throw a transfix onto the Mumak itself, the Mumak ignores the spell completely. You pretend like it never existed. But if you transfix the pilot, the driver of the Mumak, in this case the Mahud Beast Rider or just the normal commander of the Mumak, basically what happens is the Mumak gets moved as if it was being compelled. So you have to target the rider, which means that you have to do a little angled upwards line to try and hit spells. It means that you probably have to get 2 inches closer than you'd like to, basically. What else do we need to talk about with this profile?
You can Sork Blast people out of the Howder.
You can Sork Blast people out of the Howder.
If you Sork Blast someone, it's a 4+ to knock them. On a 1, 2, 3, you roll. And if it's 1, 2, 3, they go prone. On a 4+, they're knocked and they suffer falling damage.
Yes, so they just fall out of the Howder.
Which isn't necessarily as great as driving the Mumak itself, but it's hilarious, and it means that if the Mumak takes any damage following that, it's gonna stampede much more likely because it'll go from big courage 5 to 2.
Yeah, correct.
That being said, I think compelling the driver is the best option, and that is in retrospect sort of why we talked about the Sigils of Defiance being so important.
Yes,
as well as that 2-will commander instead of a 1-will commander.
Yeah, I think the only other thing we'll talk about quickly now is the way interacting with terrain works. So if you run into terrain, the Mumak will cop a Strength 9 hit straight away. I believe the Howdir from memory also cops a Strength 9 hit, as well as every single model, friend or foe, cops the Strength 9 hit in the terrain feature. It is really powerful to use the terrain features to hurt the Mumak, because you'll be wounding it on a 3, unless they buy the defense 8. Otherwise, it'll be a 4+. And it will be making you roll a stampede check. But in saying that as well, you can use it to huge effect to hit buildings that has a whole bunch of archers hiding in it.
Don't hide in a building against the Mumak. Just stay on the ground and kite it around. Yes. So let's talk about fighting the Mumak, because this model is one of the most obnoxious, frustrating, hate-inducing models in the game.
Yeah, so the first time I ever ran a Mumak against Alexa, it was a 25-minute game.
No, it wasn't. No. That was the second game. The first game I just ran away from you because we were playing Reconnoiter.
Oh, that's
the second game we played like 1K Gondor versus Harad, and I just lined up like 25 models because I was like, well, listen, surely it'll stop and they'll charge it with Boromir. Let me tell you something. The Mumak don't stop.
No.
Troops, listen, if you want to stop the Mumak, you have to put a building or a hero between you and it.
Yes.
There is no other option.
Yeah. There was a White Dwarf that came out back in like 2008. I remember reading it and being like, oh man, this is so cool. Look at this. This dwarf hero stopped a Mumak charge. Wow.
You're hurting everyone's ears. Please stop.
No, it's perfect. But like, you basically have to do that, right? You need to pick your biggest, baddest, roadblocky hero and park it in the Mumak's way and challenge it on a move.
Ideally, you're looking for high fate heroes.
Yeah.
Also.
Either high fate or high defense, right? It's strength 9, so you really do need dwarves to kind of do something with it. But basically, you need 3 wound, 3 fate heroes. And you need to just be okay with saying, hey, I'm going to do 1 might now to do a move off with this Mumak. And if I win, fantastic. If I lose, I'm going to spend 2 fate and probably 1 might point.
Yeah, so the default Mumak itself is...
Fight 4.
Is manageable. That's the main thing. Yes, the fight 4 is its greatest weakness. Getting any sort of hero into it will let you beat it in a fight. That's the thing you have to think about. We will talk about the Legendary Legion variant of it later when we talk about the Legendary Legion itself. However, just talking about the base Mumak at these 300, 325 point sort of levels, the answers to it are there. And they're like, you can take the Mumak on directly if you put that hero in. You have to be brave. You have to just say, I'm going to take it. I'm going to cop getting hit, and then I'm going to win the fights.
Yes.
And you can do that because the Mumak is 300 points.
Yeah.
And then every turn you force the move off, and, if you win them, you get into the Mumak, and you can force a Stampede probably relatively quickly. And, heroes are relatively good at winning it, and especially if it's only a D7, your Strength 3 troops are also still only winning it on just 6s rather than 6s, 4s.
Yeah.
So the normal Mumak you can take on in a straight fight. You just have to know that you lead with your hero.
Yes.
Your hero has to be the one who just walks up to it, takes the hits, and then you bring the support in to help him finish it off.
Exactly, yes. And it's one of those really weird models because most of the time you want to invert that, right? You want to blunt force someone's big engagement tool with your chaff and then swing in for the counterpunch with your heroes. If you do that with a Mumak, you've just lost the game.
You can't chaff them, essentially. Yes, that's what we're...
Yes. You need to pretend that your hero that's 3 fate, 3 wounds, or 2 fate, 3 wounds. Ironically, a Hasharin is a really good roadblock model for this guy.
Hasharin is fantastic for it, yeah, because he's cheap, and he has 3 fate.
And he has defense.
Yes. So
it's the perfect
you can even tank out the fight, yes.
And so basically what you do with a model like the Hasharin is you go, here's a 25 mil base that is a column from the table all the way through the roof that my Mumak has to treat like a terrain feature, basically. I, as the pilot of the Mumak, want to avoid that base at all cost. And you, as the person piloting that hero, that road blocking hero, is treating it like a 5, 6, 10, however fast that model moves, inch moving terrain feature that stops the Mumak doing what it wants to do.
Let's talk real quick about actually terrain, because that is the other major counter. So for all war beasts, they cannot cross obstacles that are more than 2 inches tall. They cannot make jump tests, climb tests, sleep tests, or swim tests. They may not lie down, they may not defend barriers, they may enter difficult terrain so long as the model will fit, but it will halve their move value. So the other main thing is putting building. Because the Mumak can only move in a straight line and has to move the full 8 inches, you can outmaneuver it. If you're playing on a sparse table, it's rough. But if you're playing on a fairly well populated table, because of its huge base, because of the way it moves, you can outmaneuver the Mumak. Don't go in the building, just run around it. And if you're playing objective-based scenarios or anything along those lines, play for those objectives, leave them, just focus the Haradrim themselves.
Yes. And
leave them. You could, ignoring the Mumak is, if you don't have those heroes or you don't want to commit to them because there's a big threat, because it is very scary to commit to taking the Mumak hit.
Yes.
You can play an avoidance camp against it. That is the other main way to deal with it.
Yes.
Because 2-inch tall terrain is not very tall. There's a lot of 2-inch tall terrain.
Yeah. It just means that things like walls and stuff like that, the Mumak can ignore, right? So if you're running with a lot of barricades and that sort of stuff on boards, things like that, small trees, foliage like that, and actually water effects as well is something that will never hinder any war beast at all. But otherwise, small terrain features like that would usually provide you with, barricades to defend, stuff like that. The Mumak basically just ignores it. It treats it like open ground and just walks straight over the top of it. If the Mumak space is where that feature should be, you basically just take the feature off the table. It's one of those really interesting models in how it moves like that, but most buildings will be taller than 2 inches, which means you can just kind of
even statues.
Yeah, statues, stuff like that.
If you have a statue in the middle of the board, you just sort of ring around the rosy the Mumak around it. It runs off 8 inches in a straight line, and then you just sort of go forward away from it. There's a lot of things you can do like that. And if you're playing the missions where that's the option, that is a very solid way of dealing with it, because the rest of the list is D4 dudes.
Yes. And you're basically running, if it's 750 points, let's say you put 320 points into that Mumak, you only have to kill 360 points worth of other
Yeah, it is legitimately half or more of the army, depending on how you run it.
Realistically, with the way the Howder would work, it will be more than half your army. It's in that base itself. And so you can really play around how the Mumak wants to play the game. So, is it an obnoxiously powerful profile? Of course it is. Is it one that has its obvious counters? Yeah, definitely. Is it one that can be feast or famine? 100%.
It is absolutely... Because in the scenarios that the Mumak dominates, it dominates.
Yes.
Like, you don't want to play contest against the Mumak because there's this just one-turn game of, oh no. Like, especially with the War Leader, which we will talk about later. That being said, that is all of our basic profiles covered, I think. I think the Mumak took us like 25 minutes, which is about what I expected, quite frankly. But I think now we're going to take a break because I need to stop looking at this stupid elephant.
Yes, so we'll see you in the allies and list. Alrighty, let's jump straight into our allies matrix. So, the Serpent Horde is green allies with 3 different army lists. Corsair, Mordor, and Farharad. Alexa, what are your thoughts about those 3?
These are all really solid ally options that bring things that this army doesn't already do, which is exactly what you want out of your allies, essentially.
Yeah, 100%. I think the most obvious ally in this army is allying straight into Mordor. It's the one you see in the movies. It's the one that has such a huge army list that has so many unique profiles. From monsters to more cheat cav to strength 4 troops to powerful utilizing heroes to other war beasts to ring rates to Mordor literally is I think it literally is the largest army list in the game, and there's a reason for it. And so I think looking at that, it's a really, really powerful ally. And being able to look at that and then say, but what if I want to do Corsairs as a green ally? What if I want to do Farharad as a green ally as well? Those are both options as well. I know you've had experience playing with the Corsair side. How have you found allying with that?
It's really solid. We wrote our list for it last week, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
So I think that the things that this army more so brings stuff to Corsairs rather than Corsairs bringing stuff to it, if that makes sense. I think Suladan and a small contingent allied to Corsairs is a really good way. Yeah. And then Mordor and Farharad. Farharad, you had a great success with this list.
Yes.
Thanks to my brilliant decision to tell you to buy half trolls. It's all me, basically. I won you HobbitCon. Let's be honest.
Okay.
Besides that, yes, Farharad is more of a ally to... Sorry, if Corsairs... In Corsairs, it's Suladan is an ally to Corsairs.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. He's the secondary part of the list.
Yeah.
With Farharad, the Farharad is the secondary part of a Serpent Horde list. In terms of model count, it's bringing maybe 10 to 15 models, but those models are the high value, the half trolls and the camels.
Yeah.
Because they bring... I mean, the half trolls bring 5/5 at 2 wins. They bring this very tough front line at a very high fight value, which mixes great with really cheap spear supports. And then the camels bring camels. We'll talk more in depth about camels at some other point when we talk about Farharad as a list on their own. But the camels are an excellent addition with the insane hitting power and the 4+ impaling spikes.
Yes.
And the Camel King is a really good addition as well.
Yes, I think just the way that those allies function with the Serpent Horde basically just makes this force in general something to really be reckoned with, because you have so many ways of running this army. Like, I think this little trifecta of green allies with the Serpent Horde means that it's almost impossible to find an army composition that doesn't exist within how any of those profiles function with each other. And I think looking at either of your 2 big named heroes, that being Suladan or the Merchant King, basically means that you have 2 obnoxiously powerful banners that happen to also be heroes, which means your banner won't get sniped out by a random arrow shot or Sork Blast. It means that your leader is also a banner. You have a physical banner on your tabletop. You don't have to pay the 25-point tax for it. And you have other models, if they bring banner effects, like a Bosun from Corsairs, you're not dropping 2 points for no reason because you randomly...
I think we've definitely talked about it a lot, that Suladan is just a really great model to ally into a lot of lists. Like, this army is a great add to other armies.
Yeah.
Because you bring cheap spears and you bring a very cheap, very efficient 6-inch banner. And those are both great things to bring into a lot of armies. I haven't looked too much at Mordor. It's not a list I'm too keen on playing, but you have looked at it a lot, and you've brought some very solid lists allying Suladan to that.
Yeah.
So, like, I think that's something very much to think about. Like, starting this army gives you a lot of a different way, like, as we talked about the versatility of list building, the 3 green ally options that you have just balloon out into like so many, like 10, 15 plus different archetypes and ideas you can build.
Yeah.
Especially because Mordor is such a huge list. We're going to talk about some memes with Mordor.
Yes.
But you could bring very serious, very competitively minded armies allying Mordor and Serpent Horde.
Yes. And I think the only other thing to mention very quickly is your yellow allies. You have a couple of weird yellow allies. You have Karna, Easterlings from memory. You have Moria, and you have Isengard. I think those are your only yellow allies.
I think those are the main ones.
Yeah.
I think that there are some ideas about bringing yellows in here that could be neat. But again, I think you have a very solid army bonus. It's not the end of the world if you lose it, because you can just run the stuff that doesn't lose it, essentially. If you run like Merchant Guard and Watches, your army bonus isn't that relevant. And if you ally with another army that doesn't have a very important army bonus to do some tricks, that's an option to think about. I think sticking within this green trifecta is well worth doing.
Yeah, I think the only list that I've seen someone else run before, which I loved the idea of, was a Balrog Suladan list. And essentially the list was designed to be, they rejigged all the models, they did some heavy conversions on the Haradrim side of it to just look like middlemen sort of thing. Men that are mercs, basically, coming down from the remnants of Rudar or somewhere like that sort of thing, and doing warband with old mate Balrog running around and Suladan being a banner for him.
Doing contract work for the Balrog.
Basically, right? And it was a really cool list. He brought a bunch of Merchant Guard as the front line. He had a whole bunch of goblins running around behind it. I believe it was a Balrog, Suladan, and a Shaman were the 3 models.
Sounds good to me.
It was something like that. And it was a really cool list. It wasn't the most competitive list running, but I loved the way it played.
That's pretty neat. All right, let's get on to our list. And during this, we will talk about the Legendary Legion, the Grand Army of the South. So, what does the Grand Army of the South bring you? Well, the first thing it gives you is the Mumak War Leader, which in my opinion is the way to run a Mumak, essentially. I think that the benefits you get from running this variant of it, if you're trying to be competitive with the Mumak, I think it's the way to go. I think you'd agree as well, in general.
Yeah, definitely. It's the one I've brought to tournaments before. I've brought the War Leader to 2 tournaments. One was a good versus evil themed style event. I got best evil at that one, i.e. I came first for the evil forces. And the other one was the Australian Masters event that ran, which is a non-invitational style just tournament that gets run here. And I believe I ended up doing very middling in that event with it. I think
you got Ring Wraith. That was the problem, though.
Yes, I got Ring Wraith. Like, I had a game where I didn't lose a model. I had a game where I didn't kill a model. And I think the Mumak War Leader, or any Mumak, will show both extremes of that very comfortably, right? A good player will get curb stomped, and a good player will curb stomp, and a bad player will get curb stomped. I think there's no other extremes when you look at this profile.
But let us begin with what the War Leader brings us. So, he functions similarly to the upgrade we talked about earlier. So you get a Fight 5, Strength 5, D5, 3 Attack, 3 Wound, Courage 6, 3 Might, 2 Will, 2 Fate hero, who is your new pilot for your Mumak.
Yes.
He comes with a long-bladed spear, which is a 2-handed weapon or a spear. Not that relevant if he's using a sling has gone horribly wrong.
Yep.
The thing that actually makes him very strong, there's a few. So the first thing is he comes on the Royal War Mumak. So, Royal War Mumak is a Mumak, but it comes with the Gnarled Hide, Sigils of Defense, and Tusk Weapon Upgrades base. So you're paying 400 points for this variant of it, which is pretty solid for what you're getting with the basically 4 upgrades.
Yes.
Which is how much you basically pay normally anyway for this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And you get a fight value of 5 rather than 4, which huge. We've already talked a lot about today about Fight 4 v Fight 5. Getting to be Fight 5 base is very good. Next up, he gets the Inspiring Presence. Oh, Imposing Presence, sorry. While mounted upon his Royal War Mumak, the first time each turn that an enemy model declares a heroic move within 12 of the War Leader, roll a d6. On a 4+, the heroic move is immediately cancelled, and the spent might is still lost. When the Mumak War Leader is atop his Mumak, measure the range from the Mumak's base.
Huge.
So what's the primary counter to the Mumak? It's calling a move off and stopping it from moving. Well, half the time you have to spend 2 might on that move off.
Yes, and the most important thing with this rule is, let's say you only have one hero in range, right? Let's say it's just Aragorn who's in range. He goes, mighty hero, may as well use my 3 point of might, whatever, and the war leader cancels it. You can't just spend another point of might on that hero. That heroic got called and got cancelled. You basically treat it like Aragorn lost the roll-off and someone moved into him. You don't get to freely call another one with Aragorn. You have to use a second hero to call it.
Very obnoxious. This rule is so frustrating. It's so
Yes.
frustrating. His next special rule, the range of the Mumak leader's standfast is 12 inches rather than 6. Additionally, models in his warband may deploy within 12 rather than 6, and may deploy the outside of the Howdah if they wished. While the Mumak war leader is atop his more Mumak, measure the range of his special rule from his base. 12-inch standfast, obviously very strong.
Yep, and
Now,
you can deploy within 12 inches, not in the Howdah. Huge.
And for heroic abilities, shouldn't it be actions? That's very confusing.
Yeah.
He gets heroic march, heroic strike, heroic strength, heroic challenge. Now, realistically, he can't. The leader cannot affect his Mumak with those actions normally, except for march. If he gets dismounted from his Howdah, I guess he can call the strikes and stuff.
Yeah.
But again, if that's happened, something's gone very wrong for you, and you probably aren't in a good spot. You can come in clutch, maybe. Like, he is actually a very, like, I think we've talked about this. We wish that this profile was something you could just bring without the Mumak attached.
Like, I had to pay 120 points to bring this with, like, just on its own.
But just on foot, even.
Yeah.
Like, strength 5, D5, 3 attacks, 3 wounds.
Oh, man, imagine you can bring this on a camel.
Yeah, like, I think that would be a really neat addition at some point if they added that. I don't think it's going to happen, but it'll be cool.
Yes. So, the reason why you bring the Grand Army of the South Legendary Legion is a couple of things. The
So you
Grand
get
Army,
access to him?
Yes, you get access to him and you get access to the full Mahud army range as well. You have a couple of restrictions, with that being that 50% of the army have to have the Haradrim keyword. You have to bring one Mumak model base. It can be the war leader though. And any Mahud model has to be in a Mahud Heroes warband. Ironically, it does mean you can bring Haradrim Warriors and Serpent Guard and Serpent Riders with Mahud Heroes, but things like camels and things like that have to be brought with Mahud Heroes. In terms of the special rules you gain, the Mumak gets Harbinger of Evil. So any Mumak in the army just gets Harbinger. The other really good one you get is you get both of your normal army bonuses. So you get the 50% bow limit from the Haradrim, and you get the Warrior's Pride, which is the fearless if Mahud heroes are in combat.
For Mahud Warriors. You are missing the poison on everything, though.
Correct. That is something that's really important. I think a lot of people miss that when they first read it.
So it's some of your, is it Haradrim Rider War Spears?
So it's your spears on the Haradrim Warriors and Raiders.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm missing the poison, which is unfortunate. But the biggest, most obnoxious extra rule you get is the makings of a king. Your army leader may declare a free heroic action at the start of any fight in which they are engaged in combat with the enemy leader. So remember how we talked about put your leader into the Mumak? Well, if the Mumak war leader is your leader, he may still use this ability while atop his royal Mumak, and the Mumak is affected by the heroic action. So normally you can't call strikes for your Mumak. But now you can, for free!
Yes.
For free!
You don't need to spend a point of might to call a strike. It means that suddenly this model gets a free heroic action and you pretend like the Mumak is the one who just called it. My favorite thing to do is just call a combat. And just laugh at them and go, what are you going to do about it? Like,
Yeah, like if your leader loses and gets stomped, you just die, and it's so like. And if it is one of the few leaders who can threaten you, then you call a strike. If it's the Aragons, the Bolgs, the Azorgs, those kinds of heroes, that's when you just go for the strike offs.
but even then, what are they going to do to you? 3 wounds?
Oh yes, the thing is,
no.
you are Courage 5. You have a lot of will on this variant of the hero.
Coach 6, mate. Come on.
Oh, 6. He's
Yeah,
6.
he's Coach 6.
Yeah, never stampeding is essentially the long and short of it, unless you're getting plumped by like drain courages. But that's why you have magic resist.
Yes.
So this essentially what this does is it cuts out essentially a lot of the one of the counterplays to Mumak, the fighting it with a hero or with magic,
Yes.
which essentially means it's avoidance game.
Yeah.
This is a 400-point model.
Yes.
It is at 750 more than half your army.
Yeah.
So just don't fight it.
Yeah.
That's all I have to say.
Looking at the context of that, let's actually jump into the
To
list.
the list we brought here. So the gimmick of this list is essentially that you have to fight it.
Yeah.
That's the idea. So the Mumak war leader leads 11 Haradrim Warriors with bows in the Howdah and 2 Mahud Raiders with war spears, while Suladan on the armored horse with a bow leads 9 Serpent Riders. So the trick here is you have to kill the Mumak, because within the Howdah, including the Mumak itself and the War Leader, there is more than half your army, which means your army cannot be broken unless the Mumak is dealt with.
Correct. And I think the most obnoxious part of all of this is if you are fighting an army that can put the pressure down with bows or magic and things like that, every single model in the Howdah can just go prone, which means you just drop line of sight on the entirety of your Howdah and the people within it. And you have a defense 9/5 in Howdah. It's probably not dying to shooting anyway either.
Yes.
Which means like you literally have to just do the 10 wounds to the Mumak or cause it to stampede or fall
You
off
need
a
to have
table.
you need to have some sort of, infinite will wizard like a Saruman popping at the War Leader every turn.
Yeah.
Or you need to have something along those lines, which is fine.
Yes.
There are ways to still answer it. But with the way this list is set up, it basically amplifies the strengths of the Mumak to an extreme and also amplifies its weaknesses by being such a huge part of your army.
Correct.
If you're playing like a really wide spread out scenario, like a domination where your opponent just deploys the objectives as far apart as possible, or even capture and control can be quite tricky, this list can struggle and your opponent can deal with you. But if you're playing a Lords of Battle, style art mission,
Yeah.
it's just like you're gonna crush.
Yes. And I think that's where this style of list really shines, right? My favorite thing to do is you go Suladan standing behind the Mumak, and if the Mumak charges, you get 6 dice. You have 4 because it's just moved and gets the extra dice for being an effective charge move. Then it gets 1 because it's in range of its own inspiring presence, and 1 because Suladan's holding a banner behind it. And you basically just run around being the babysitter of this thing that's just walking through the entirety of an enemy's army. You have 2 Mahud Raiders. Camels can do a strength 4 impact hit every time they charge, which means it's only 1 dice, so you can't multi-charge and roll it on each model, but it means that if the Mumak ever gets tied up, you can try to untie it or drop an extra model or 2 off with them. You also have 9 Serpent Riders and Suladan. That's enough, quote-unquote, horses to try to keep... you can keep up with it, you can try to disengage it from combat, stuff like that.
Well, also that contingent is very good as your sort of backup plan on those mission-based scenarios. You try to sort of force your opponent's army split and then attack the small groups that are sort of spread out with that 10 cav little contingent.
Yeah, 100%.
It's not going to be like if you're like there are ways to deal with it, obviously, as we've talked about, but it can be a very like on the right mission, on the right terrain. This list is just terrifying to deal with.
Its highs are exceptional, its lows
are pathetic.
Yes.
That's if the Mumak gets forced into a stampede, rams into a building, and everyone in the Howdah just drops, or even just gets compelled by a wizard.
Yeah,
you're just gonna cry because that is your lose condition essentially.
Yes, exactly.
So yeah, when we talk about this legion and this style of playing with the Mumak, it's a very feast of family list.
Yeah, and I found from my own experience, I was I didn't play it very well at either of the events I played it at, and I think the reason I had a huge success in one event was purely due to just it's such an obscure model to fight against, and people I was fighting against just didn't play correctly. The reason I did poorly at the other event, or not poorly, I did middling at the other event, I got, I believe, in the top 40%, around about that sort of margin, was purely because I played into 1 or 2 people that really knew how to play around it and just had some bad luck in missions as well.
Yeah, personally, I despise this model, especially the War Leader variant. This list is here if you want to run the Mumak.
Yeah, and I think if you want to run it, looking at the Legendary Legion and looking at this variation of it, obviously you can play around a lot with the things you bring with it. You don't have to bring Suladan. The other restriction of the Legendary Legion, though, is you have to either bring Suladan or the War Leader. You can bring both if you want to, and of course, because you have to bring a Mumak as well, it makes sense to bring the Mumak War Leader.
Yeah, I think you always, if you're going to bring a Mumak, I think you always go for the War Leader variant.
Yeah, it just seems so strong, right?
It negates the biggest weaknesses of bringing the Mumak and has a bunch of really cool strengths. It just makes sense to bring like this. Now, let's get onto the next list.
Yes, so this is my list that I run if I'm doing a predominantly foot-based list. So you have Suladan on an armored horse. He's running with him 4 Watchers of Karna with twin blades, 4 Merchant Guard, 8 Haradrim with bow and spear. You then have Raza, the Fang, running with 3 Watchers with twin blades, 3 Merchant Guard, and 6 Haradrim with bow and spear. You then have a King on horse with war spear with 3 Watchers, twin blades on them, 3 merchant guards, 6 Haradrim with bow and spear, and the last warband is a Taskmaster with 3 watchers with twin blades, 3 merchant guard, and 2 Haradrim Warriors with bow and spear. So you get 9 might, 52 models, and 22 bow shots.
Okay, well, listen, let's talk about this. Okay, strengths and weaknesses. Obviously, 22 bow shots is an absurd amount. Basically, no one is out shooting you. Short of, like, maybe very specific matchups for very specific lists that can do tricks, like a Blinding Light army or a Wood Elf army hiding behind a rock. It is what it is, and that's what it is, Chris, right?
Yes.
Wood Elves with Elven Cloaks can get the Stalk Unseen rule, and so if they're obscured at all, you can't shoot them, which means that no matter how many bows you bring, you can never shoot their bows, which means you get outshot.
Yes.
But outside those very specific scenarios, it's very hard to outshoot this.
Yeah.
Its biggest downside is obviously that it's a D4 army.
Correct.
Slash D3. About a third of it is D3. Would it be a third or a quarter? A quarter. Quarter is D3, quarter is, and then 75% is D4.
Yeah, exactly that, yeah.
Which means you also, in reverse, can get shredded. It is a very high model count, though, and that is at a decent fight value of 4.
Yeah, so I find if your opponent has kind of that 10 plus bow shots, you're okay to shoot at them and trade shots for 1 turn, maybe 2, but inevitably you do want to just hit combat, because that's where your punch really gets brought to bear. You have effective strength 6 on, I think it's 13 merchant guard, and you have 2 attacks on 13 watchers, and then behind that you have 22 spears as well. Plus all of your heroes means that you just have huge damage output once lines meet.
Yeah, well, you can shoot very heavily. It can also, especially if you can't get to their bows, especially against D6 armies, is when the trades can start to hurt.
Yes.
Because of your low defense.
Yes.
You have the damage output with your shooting, but you still might not get favorable trades necessarily.
Correct. And there's been a few games where exactly that issue has happened. Lake Town into these guys, so there's been a few games where Lexa and I have played where his Lake Town will still outshoot me despite only being 11 or 12 bow shots, because it's all defense 5 on his front line, which means I'm still wounded on 6s. Or 7 because the allies in dwarves. Stuff like that, right? And it means that suddenly, it's 20 odd bow shots, but 20 odd bow shots on 6s compared to Bard, Percy, and 11 other
shots
bows.
on 5s.
Yeah, killing on 5s or even 4s some of the time means that my army just evaporates.
Yeah, it is very much about sort of looking at the breakpoints on how you decide. If you're fighting against an army that has, 3+ shoot strength 3, like an elf army, while you can outshoot them in terms of raw shots, if you can't get really good angles and you can't get at the right targets, you should just walk at them.
100%, yes.
And just use that mortal count, the big mortal count, as a buffer to take some damage. You have a couple off on the side for like a couple cheeky shots. Look for shots into combat similar to Corsairs. Yes, that's a good option there again, because you have a D2 against strength. Strength 2 against D4. Shooting your own guys to shoot people out of combat is a decent option.
Yes. And I think looking at this list and saying I need to close the gap, that's when this Taskmaster option really actually shines, right? It's, you have to sometimes just call that march, run straight at your opponent, use the moves, use the marches, things like that. And that's where this Taskmaster might actually start getting you a lot of those points of might back.
Yeah, this is the kind of list where you'd call 2 marches and then a move to just commit to someone in 3 turns.
Yes. And if you're lucky with it, you'll get 2 might back. If you're someone like me, you'll get none. If you're someone...
get all of it.
Look, I'll either get all of it or none of it, right? I'll either have an 18 might list or a 9 might list. There's
9 might's not bad, let's be honest.
It's true, it's not bad, but...
I'd take that.
Compared to Corsairs, hey.
What did I have, 5 might in the last game?
Yeah, 5. So it really can be good. It really can be helpful to have it there. Again, don't expect it to happen. Use it as if this works, wonderful. If it doesn't, big whoop.
He's a captain with 1 less might.
Yes, he's a captain with 1 less might, identical profile otherwise, and half the time he'll get you might back when it's one of the 3 actions he can do it on.
Yeah. Solid. And this is the list where he shines, realistically. Yes. Alright, let's talk shenanigans. So, okay, this list is built around the Golden King meme fest. So we're bringing the Undying with 8 black Numenorians from Mordor, Shagger with the Shield of Cirith Ungol with 7 black Numenorians, the Golden King of Abrakhan, and 10 Haradrim Warriors, 5 with bow spear and 5 with just spears. and the Mordor Troll Catapult with the Severed Heads upgrade. Now, what does the Severed Heads upgrade you do, might say? I've never even seen this. What even does a Mordor Troll Catapult do?
So, a Mordor Troll Catapult is a siege weapon. It has the 6-inch scatter because it is an inaccurate siege weapon. The Mordor Troll is literally a 100-point Mordor Troll.
Not quite. He is unarmed. That's the downside.
Is he?
Yes, he has no other war gear.
Ah,
so he is
very
unarmed.
interesting.
So
He
that
is
is something to
unarmed.
consider.
Okay.
He's not quite a full troll, but he's still pretty close. He has still got that high fight, that high strength, all of that.
Yes.
But he will suffer a -1 on his combat rolls.
Correct. He's also Coach 3, ironically enough, where normal troll is Coach 4. That's a little fun fact for you. Anyway, he is an upgrade to the actual siege engine, which basically means that he lets the siege engine reroll not only its to hit roll, but also when you roll scatter rolls, you can reroll that as well. And the Mordor Troll Catapult suddenly becomes a super reliable hitting weapon when it comes to actually using that properly. You then also get the Severed Heads upgrade.
Alright, so let's go through the Severed Heads upgrade real quick. The siege engine may choose to either fire the normal way or fire a collection of severed heads. Now, you should get a collection of cut off Gondor helmets and throw them at your opponent whenever you fire.
I agree.
That being said, what happens when you fire it? So you ignore the normal strength, and you instead inflict a strength 3 hit to all models within 2 of your target. This shot will not knock anyone prone, however, and it can only inflict 1 wound. But any models hit must immediately pass a courage test or be removed from play.
Removed from play?
Removed from play.
Oh my goodness.
So, wait, remember what we were talking about with the Golden King of Abrakhan, where suddenly all their heroes flee?
What? Okay, so hold on. Let me get this straight, right? You have a severed head, which you can fire into combat because it doesn't affect your models. Only enemy models make the courage check. And the Golden King can just say, hey, you over there, Mr. Aragorn, you actually courage 1. Have fun. Or courage 2 because you have Harbinger. So
Yes,
it's actually courage 1.
so that's why the Undying is here. The Undying chucks, he's basically the best spellcasting ring wraith. And he's on a horse, I should have put that in. And he basically provides you the Harbinger -1 aura, and then chucks Strength Courage on heroes occasionally, puts them down, and then burns their will out. And then suddenly, 1 hit on Aragorn and just poof!
Yes.
And then the rest of the synergy on the list is the Black Numenorians provide you with a terror line that is basically the highest defense you can bring in this list. And then the spears are the cheapest spears you can get. And that sort of gives you some staying power.
So super low model count, but the catapult, if it gets to work, obviously will do a lot of work. And it's really cool because you can still fire the normal weaponry with the catapult. So normal weaponry is, from memory, it's a strength 10 hit, which will slay you outright. And then within 2 inches of that strength 10 hit, it's a strength 5 hit from the top of my head. And is a really, really, really good way to clear through the higher strength or high defense things like dwarves. But if you're fighting against a Coach 2 army, just use a 7 head, because you can choose which one you do.
They go to Courage 1.
Yeah, they go to Courage 1 when they're in range of the ring wraith, right? And if they don't have a way of negating it like Fury,
And you're still getting a strength 3 hit on a 2-inch AoE, which isn't bad. I mean, it's not great.
It's not great.
But it's still
there,
it's gonna
right?
put some shots. It's like combined with that courage just followed, it's annoying, and it's gonna maybe take out someone's horse, yada yada. But it is that combination of this catapult with the Golden King just making heroes that are high courage normally go down to courage 2, courage 1,
Yeah.
and just go poof, off the table.
Yes.
And you just shoot it every turn, and you just go, oh no, my Black Warriors are taking his 6s to die. Oh no.
Yes, exactly. Right? And it's only a strength 3 hit with the 7 head, which means if you're firing into combat en masse, yeah, you're going to hit your Black Numenorians and stuff like that with the actual hit, but they don't have to make the courage check themselves. It's just phenomenal.
It's hilarious. There are some missions where this list will suck. That's the unfortunate reality of it.
Dare you to play Maelstrom into a Mumak with this, hey?
I mean, yes. Any mission, though, where you're forced onto the line or you need to take board control really quickly, this list might struggle. But it's hilarious when it works. Your opponent's not going to want to play with you ever again, but that's okay, because you just made Aragorn flee the table.
Exactly. To the death, phenomenal.
To the death, Lords of Battle, anything where you can deploy in the corner and your opponent has to come to you because of that catapult threat.
Yeah, I think To the Death is the best one, for no other reason than it's 24 inches apart. Lords of Battle, they can deploy 24
Fog
inches.
of War is another good one.
Fog War.
It's actually really good.
Yeah, Fog War's phenomenal because you can elect your protect target to be the
Captain.
The captain.
Who's never going to get charged.
Or the Undying, because the Abrakhan, the Golden King should be your leader. They're both pillars of valor. You can pick. I think you do the Undying as your not leader for no other reason than Fog of War and Assassination.
And Contest.
Contest, actually, yeah. Contest.
I mean, the Golden King will get much more kills than the Undying. He's not great taking on the other hero, but if you can sort of buffer for him and get him into a couple warriors...
Man, if only you could just make that hero disappear off a coach check.
Exactly the entire point, isn't it? Yeah, the Undying chucks some transfixes, stops heroes from getting into you, you fire the severed heads, and you just go poof.
Surely you just sap Will the first turn.
Yeah, that too. You could do that, yes.
Sap Will, make him courage 1.
Yeah, that too.
Yeah, phenomenal, right? Yeah. Because you can make him drop courage after he rolls the check.
So if you get rid of all their courage, it just depends on the exact hero and the break. Like depending on the hero's stats, depends on what you want to hit.
Obviously, yes.
And obviously, if they resist, then it's even better, especially if they fail.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
The best thing about Drain Courage, I think it's got a much lower cast value.
Yes.
So you can do like, especially in a longer form game, where
2+ from memory.
Yes. So if you have that longer form game. Where you're deployed far away, chucking a couple Drain Courages so that you save the will on the Golden King is really solid as an option.
Can be clutch throughout the game. Yeah, being able to interchange which one is one spending will can be a really nice thing.
Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of how you balance it out. That's how you sort of try and make this essentially meme list sort of viable and solid.
Yeah.
And again, matchup wise, if you're playing something that's fearless, like you've still got a decent ish fighting for, but you're gonna probably get one.
If you're playing against a fearless army, though, it means that they're probably an expensive army, which means strength 10 and 5.
Or there's some sort of Swarm Protector bodyguard list. In which case, going for the snipe, if you can snipe out that hero that gives them that fearless, you can balance it out. You can find ways to win against those lists too. The
only other thing I'll mention quickly is the Undying compelling models outside of the scatter range. Yes. Can be super impactful, and although you might explain it 3 or 4 times to your opponent, they might lose track of it for just one turn, right? They might not self-trap that one time, they might lose a model here there to a coach check, or something might happen, and suddenly you're sniping out those heroes. And
also blacked out their horses.
Blacked outing horses, stuff like that. There's a lot of fun tricks.
Having a Ring Wraith is a really good spellcaster. Complements the sort of more defensive nature that you're basically anchoring to protect the catapult and keep them 12 away from it, so you can always shoot.
In my opinion, the Undying is probably the best spellcaster in the game relative to how cheap it is for what it does, right?
A fully kitted Witch King is probably a better caster overall, but you're going to need to invest more points, and that sort of works out.
It's the reason of the Undying doesn't even need the horse necessarily. Obviously, you get a lot of tools out of the extra movement, but 18 points of will with the best casting for Ring Wraith profiles is just insane.
Yes. Now, let us go on to the final list. The Southern Raiders. Chris, take it away.
Yes. So this is far and above my favorite way to play this army list. It is fully mounted. It's 36 models. It's 16 bow shots still. And so let's jump into this profile, to the army, and I'll explain why this list works. So you get Suladan on the armored horse. He has 5 Serpent Riders, so fight 4 horses. And then you get 4 Haradrim Raiders with War Spear and Bow. So you get, in his warband, 10 models total. All of them have poison, really important because of my next warband. And you get 9 Lancers. So you then get the Betrayer on a horse. He has with him 4 Serpent Riders and 4 Haradrim Raiders with War Spear and Bow. So again, 9 more horses. You get 4 more bow shots. You have 8 Lancers. You have the Betrayer to give everything venom. The King, which is our next warband, with 4 Serpent Riders and 4 Haradrim Raiders again. The King is the only one who doesn't get full rerolls to wound, which means that one Serpent Rider or Haradrim Raider that wins a fight, if they charge into infantry models, go to rolling 4 dice per attack, essentially. So they
have 4 chances to roll a wound, essentially. Correct. Because they roll 2 dice to wound, and then they can reroll both.
And it's at +1 to wound. So suddenly, one single cav model, if you hit a hero, for example, a dwarf hero, and you happen to win the fight against them, you get 8 chances to wound at +1 to wound. It is phenomenal killing power. like,
It is unironically the highest killing power non-heroes in the game.
yeah.
The only thing comparable is something like Sons of Earl with a piercing strike at turn 6. That is the only thing that's even coming close. Well, depending on the targets, it's beating or coming close.
Yes.
But that is a 20-point profile, which has to be within 6 inches of a hero. Here you have a 13-point profile that has to be within 6 inches of a hero.
Yeah.
Which is it's pretty solid either way.
And, like, you still get 7 points of might. 7 points isn't a huge amount. 7 points really taught me to play cavalry well.
I think it's around the average you're looking at.
Yeah. But you have 36 models. 36 models is, like, that's beating out elite lists. Like, that's pushing into close to that horde-style numbers.
I mean, it's looking at around the same level as, like, an all-infantry elf list is looking at.
Yeah. It's crazy.
It's obnoxious. The really terrifying thing about this list is the kiting potential, because you're all mounted, you never have to commit to a fight until you're fully cornered, and then you can just sort of make a breakout.
Yeah.
I think this list on 4x4s isn't too bad to deal with, but playing against this on a 6x4 at
GG.
750 or 800 points, if you have no time limit, you just, like, it's like, if there's no objectives that they have to fight you over, and even if there is objectives they have to fight you over, they just kite you till they get you to around, like, 75% of your force, like, left. They take out about 25% by just shooting you.
Yeah.
You have to be able to match them on shooting to force them. The thing is, okay, so here's the thing that you can sort of leverage against this army, is that because every model is mounted, that requires a much larger surface area to actually bring all those shots to bear.
Yes.
So what you do is you take, let's say you have about 12 bows in your list at like a D5 or a D6 especially.
Yeah.
If you group those bows together and move them in a block, it's going to be very hard for all 16 shots to be fired back at you,
Yeah.
which means you can start taking favorable trades.
Yeah. So essentially what it means is you get to, as the infantry player, double the amount of return shots you're receiving to the amount of shots you're outputting if all of your archers kind of goon squad together.
You can concentrate your firepower in a way that the cavalry just can't.
Yeah.
And so you can beat them, even if you're outnumbered, you can beat them in shooting because they're low defense and because of that high surface area.
Yeah.
But if you're lacking in that shooting to match them, if you're playing like a Mordor list that has very little shooting, if the Serpent Horde player wants to, they can just forever kite you until you're at like 75-60% of your force and only then commit to fighting you.
Yeah.
And then they do these like wave tactics, because I think I think I pointed this out to you. You were like, I felt like I was losing and then I won a lot of the first few fingers. And what would happen is you would charge, let's say 10 cav, and you would win half those fights.
Yeah.
And in the fights you lost, you would die. And in the fights you won, you would kill 2 models.
Yeah.
So you would get, and then the next turn, the next wave of cav would charge, and because you have so much cav, you can just do these waves.
Yes.
And because you're trading 2 for 1 essentially every time you charge, every time you win a fight, because you're such insane killing power, you can get 2 kills for every kill you get taken back on you.
Yeah.
You can just get these crazy fast, like, where, the first turn feels pretty equal, and then the second turn, you just start winning. And by the third turn, your opponent has no frontline left.
Yes, and it's that third turn that all 3 heroes usually join the fight as well.
Yes.
And, like, that's kind of the big coup de grace, right? Usually in the first turn, the king will join the fight and be that move off or if you really need it, that sort of stuff.
Suladan sits back and provides the banner to as much of the line as possible, and then next turn, if there's an exposed hero, he comes in with the strike, and maybe a confel from the betrayer.
Yeah.
If that isn't an option, he just repositions and sets up for the next turn doing that again.
Yes, and I think my favorite thing to do, and I've only had a chance to do it probably 4 or 5 times, is on a turn I engage my opponent on and win the following priority, and we're not contesting move-offs, I just move backwards 10 inches.
That is also a very frustrating thing you can do, because you're all cav, you can just disengage fully and then shoot again and then go for a full charge again.
It gets a little bit more complex with how move-offs work and that sort of stuff, i.e. if you're in a bad spot, you can't really move unless your king or Suladan is in the right spots to kind of move with them, because the betrayer is usually sitting in the back sort of middle ranks or back ranks of those wave-style tactics, so he's not in a good spot to move it. Your big cap bases means you often get in the way of the king or the Suladan model, and so it just kind of gets a bit clunky unless you're not being challenged or if you just assassinated that might source on that flank or whatever that looks like. So yes, you can do the fades. It's hard to do, but if you can do it, it is just one of the most
soul-crushing experiences of your life.
Yes, and it's just, I've seen it happen to me before as the infantry player, where an all-cav Rohan list hit me like a truck and then just disappeared. And I was like, well, that was my one chance to beat them. I lost a roll-off. Gambling just gave, a hobbit a might point for free, and that hobbit just walked away from me. Thanks, Vaughn. I hate you too. All right, we'll see you next game. Like, it's just one of those things, right? And if you can do that, it is painful to watch.
Yeah, I think we're done.
Yeah.
This was obnoxiously long. If you're still here, Jesus. But let's get into our final thoughts for this list. All right.
Yeah.
You've already sort of made it clear this is basically your favorite army in the game.
Oh, what? No.
Maybe, in theory.
In theory,
on a 4+, right? And I do agree. It's a very cool army. It is a very powerful army, but it's also a very fragile army. I think that's the sort of thing we've talked about our last two of our favorite armies, isn't it? Hey,
yes.
Very glass cannony, very, big hit, but also just in a half second if it goes wrong.
I think that says a lot about our individual playstyles. We are just people who really do favor let the army do the work instead of let the heroes do the work.
Yeah.
And I think both this army list and Corsairs really showcase that off to the best of their abilities. So for that reason alone, I think this army is phenomenal. And on top of that, the versatility. And on top of that, the way the heroes interact. And on top of that, the army bonus.
And the allies.
And the allies. And the this and the that. And the way this army synergizes into itself. And the way you can build layer upon layer upon layer upon layer of intricate rule design into an overall list build is what turns this army from a really cool, fun, glass cannon army to one of, in my opinion, the best competitive lists I've been able to play with in a very long time.
Just don't bring the Mumak. And you'll make everyone around you happier, including yourself. Because as you've found out, you haven't enjoyed your Mumak hours.
Yeah, look, okay. Like, full transparency, the Mumak, whilst it is a really fun model to use in some games, it can also just be one of the most soul-crushing models for me as the pilot to use, even if I'm winning the game. It's like, oh, yeah, I guess I'll just walk. Okay, cool, a bunch of stuff died.
Yeah, the Mumak is a very almost binary model. If it gets to do what it wants to do, the game just ends.
Yeah. It's not as, I think, brain deady as a lot of people think it is,
no,
just because they have to move it and do stuff with it. But it definitely is a model that really can just end a game. For better or for worse, it can just end games.
And with the game ending, I think we should end our show. I think it'd be great if you guys, if you've stuck around for this 2.5 hour, maybe almost.
Oh, I think it's gonna be.
It's gonna be at least 2.5 hour. Yeah. If you've been here through all of it, or if you've watched in a few parts, we really appreciate you taking the time to listen to what we have to say. A like, a subscribe, a comment. We'd love to hear from you guys. We'd love to hear any changes you'd like to see, any additions to the format. Anything from you, Chris?
Yeah, other than, just thank you so much for listening and being part of this journey with us. Like you've already said, I think whilst we're still very early on in the episodes and that sort of stuff, feedback and comments and that sort of stuff, whether that's through Facebook, YouTube, private messaging, all that sort of stuff, I think that's probably the biggest thing that we love to see right now.
Yes, please feed the algorithm. Thank you for watching.
Have a lovely day.